Thursday. Peter Durkee, I'm like, what the heck? Well, his son was his.
Okay, good evening. Welcome to the Georgetown School Committee meeting. The meeting of Thursday, September 27th is now called to order. The first item on our agenda is the consent agenda, which includes the approval of minutes from the regular session of 9/13/12, governance 9/7/12, public relations 9/7/12, safety 9/13/12, budget and finance 9/13/12, and the acceptance of warrants 13V13 and 12P13. Does anyone want any of these items removed? The chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved. Second.
Any further we have a motion and a second?
Yes, we have a second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next up is our student rep, Cole Martins, who I don't think is here. All right, if he comes and has something to add, we'll put him in. Okay, first on the agenda for audiences is public comment. Does anyone have anything from the public that they wish to comment on? Okay, all right. I assume all of you are here to talk about our MCAS scores? Right. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to have Mr. DeFranco come up and we're going to talk about the athletic budget. Do you want, is Peter or Brian coming up with you, or are you just solo?
Brian, why don't you
Yourself?
come up too, just in case there's any questions for you? Thanks.
So the way this is going to work is we're going to have a discussion, and then if you want to, if any members of the public want to speak, you can speak, and we just have a time limit of 3 minutes. That's just the way that we have it. But what I want to do is just so that everyone's clear on why we're talking about this tonight. The reason why it's on the agenda is because we had a meeting this summer, and our task was to really talk about the athletic budget and how we're going to balance it, because right now it's not balanced within our consolidated budget. So Mr. DeFranco's here as a result of the discussion we had at a meeting this summer, and there are only 3 members present. So what we talked about was how are we going to balance this, and what are the things that we can look at to balance the budget. And really, he's only here tonight to provide an update of how we're going to balance it. It's not to restore funding, because we know where the number is. We do have a set number for that. So during that meeting that we had, we discussed how we're going to balance the budget. And at the end, when Joan and Chris were here, we talked about re-looking at the budget for potential savings. Just going line by line, sport by sport, and saying, how can we save money? And unfortunately, at this point, they haven't identified any savings, which is what was outlined in your orange notes. And so the recommendation was to eliminate middle school basketball, boys and girls. Okay, and noting that field hockey has already been eliminated. There's a few things that we have to consider when we think about eliminating it. And these are just things that I thought of as I was going through my notes. We can make middle school basketball self-funding, which means take the total cost, divide it by participants, and that's the cost. That has its own set of pitfalls, because no other sport is forced to do that. We can look at, the other option is to consider cutting freshman basketball. And the reason why I say that is when I look at the levels that we have 3 levels of basketball at the high school and 1 at the middle school. So would it be advantageous to have 2 levels at the high school and 1 at the middle school, kind of distributing our funding? And I think that has a bigger savings than eliminating the middle school. But that's something that I would push back to you.
You true, Chris?
It's close.
Okay.
I would push back to you, because as a board, we have to remember, we're policy setting. They're doing the recommendations, and they're doing the operations part of it. The other issue that we can consider is identifying a funding source for the shortfall that we have. Right now, it looks like it's totally between $10,000 and $12,000 when you take out the $33,000 that we haven't allocated yet to choice. I noted in your numbers you have the $65,000, which we have in our budget, but we haven't added the $33 from choice yet. So if I take that $33 away from either the $45 or the $43, I'm at $10 or $12. But we need to think about that carefully for a couple reasons. One, we just asked the town for a $250,000 warrant article on Monday to fund extraordinary special ed costs. So we really need to just be able to balance this. Secondly, athletics as a whole, the whole picture, isn't sustainable the way that we're running it right now. Our costs continue to increase every year, and our users are going down. And what was really interesting is last year when we cut the user fees, the participation level went down. I don't know what to say about that, and I don't know why. But it's something that we have to be mindful as a committee. So to keep throwing money at it to fund the deficits is something we really need to think about and see if that's the way we want to go. A few issues that I think everyone needs to just get a little education on. Athletic user fees that we have right now don't cover 100% of each sport. In fact, I think there are only 1 or 2 sports that it actually covers the cost for. So within our budget, we have about $100,000 that we fund athletics with. 65 off the regular budget, 33 off of choice. The other thing that's interesting that I've seen thrown out there is co-op programs. Co-op programs have not been cut for funding. Has nothing to do with funding. It has to do with the town or the school that originates the sport can initiate a co-op funding to get the numbers up, but they can't use it as a funding or cost-sharing mechanism. So those co-ops that have gone, unfortunately, has to do with the numbers are reached in their host town. And finally, the other issue that we have to think about is we did have an override a year and a half ago of 1.2 million, which allowed us to reduce athletic fees. But the primary reason for the override was not to fund athletics. It was to really maintain a balance within our schools that will provide the best education that we can for our 1,563 students that we have. So that's, it's important just for everyone to understand that we're here to talk about their recommendation, and then it's up to us, from there to decide what to do. But it's not to say whether, their recommendation is good or bad. That's their job. That's why we have them. So, with that said.
All right. So, I think it should be noted that we did have 2 budget choices that were presented to the school committee. One did have the middle school program in it. The other did not. So, to sustain the middle school boys and girls basketball programs, we would have had to raise user fees to $350 across the board, which was not palatable. So, it was not done. The other thing that I don't think people realize necessarily is that if we keep the middle school program, it will probably kill our freshman teams because of the MIA rule that middle schoolers cannot play on a high school team if there's a middle school option. So most of our sports, soccer, lacrosse, we have middle schoolers play on the lowest level, so freshman or JV, because we don't have a middle school option.
But we're not good at following that rule.
Well, we are now.
But the past 2 years we have.
No,
Okay.
we really haven't.
All right.
So that is something that came to my attention, and I've gone to, it's called the District A Committee, and they approved our middle school waiver for the kids to play high school basketball, or freshman basketball, I should say, only if we don't have a middle school team. So our freshman girls basketball team last year was all 8th graders, so that team would not have existed. Our boys team was 11 9th graders and 4 8th graders, so there would have been only 11 kids on the team. And year to year, I coached freshman basketball for 6 years. I had some teams that were majority 8th graders, so it wouldn't have run under the current rule.
So if you flip it around, if you flip that logic around, could you just, and this is just the way that I'm thinking about it, you have a JV and a varsity at the high school level. Could you just keep your middle school program going?
Good. And the other thing to think about is those 8th graders who have been playing freshmen, they're coming back down to the middle school team. So the 7th graders and 6th graders may not actually get an opportunity to play.
Right.
So that's something else to think
Yep.
about. And then the other thing is the way the league is aligned. The Cape Ann League, most teams, every team has a varsity basketball team. Almost every team has a JV team and a freshman team. Only 3 other teams have middle school teams. So Ipswich, Manchester Essex, and Rockport. So our schedule right now, if we are to play, has 10 games. 4 are against Manchester Essex, 3 are against Rockport, and 3 are against Ipswich. So there's not a lot of variety in who you're playing, where if you play a freshman schedule, you're playing 10 or 11 other teams. Along those lines, I've talked to both varsity coaches, Mike Krawinski and David Tucker, And they are both in favor of having, if they had to choose between the two, because obviously we don't want to cut middle school basketball, but if they had to choose between the two, they'd much rather have the freshman program.
And why is that when you have so many eighth graders making it up?
I think it speeds their development, to be honest. It makes them more ready for the high school game. And the competition's better. They're playing against freshmen versus playing against middle schoolers.
Okay. Anything else?
How does, if we were fortunate to get a new school and sixth grade moves out, does that affect, would that affect at all?
I'd have to look
Talking
into it.
about if there was no more of a sixth grade?
A traditional middle school in our league is 6, 7, 8. I don't know of any 7, 8s.
I don't either. And when you look at the middle school makeup of the teams, Chris, is it eighth grade, some eighth graders move up, I
Yep.
understand that.
But
Are
they
there-
can't. They
But,
can't.
but let's assume they couldn't. So would sixth graders really even have a shot or a choice?
It would be the best 15 kids. So if there's a sixth grader who's
So it's 15 kids out of,
However many
how
try
many
out.
students in the middle school?
400 and.
I mean, obviously not everybody's a
but
basketball
then-
player, but.
Right.
See, that's been one of the challenges when we figure out the the cost by sport. Basketball is the most expensive sport to run. It's just because it's small rosters, lots of games, and in terms of the middle school, the students aren't going places that are close. So Manchester, Essex, Rockport, and Hamilton.
Ipswich, which is close.
Ipswich is a little close.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
But it's Manchester, Essex, and Rockport.
Yeah.
2/3 of your games.
Right.
So we have a freshman basketball team now, right?
do.
And what is how many kids are on it?
The boys last year had 15. The girls had, I think it's 11. I don't have it in front of me. But those 11 were all eighth graders.
Right.
All eighth graders. And last year, how many kids were on the boys' middle school basketball team?
There were 18 on the boys and 17 on the boys and 18 on the girls. So they
So
basically
you've
decided
got over 30 kids between the two teams that were playing, and if we just had a freshman team, you couldn't get that many kids playing. If we didn't have a middle school team, so that the
Right.
middle school
It's
kids
gonna
could
be-
try out
it's gonna
for
be the
freshmen,
same.
it'd be the same. It'd be the same in terms of
Number of
15
kids.
Middle school
kids on the
roster size would be
freshman.
the same.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, 17 and 18 is very abnormal. We didn't want to cut
Right, cut one or two
One or
kids.
two.
Right, but
kids.
if you eliminated the middle school program, then you'd only have the freshmen to try out, for the middle school kids to try out for. That's what they would do. That
It
would
would
all
only be eighth
that they would
graders.
have available to them would be to try out for the freshmen.
But it would, Pam,
And
it
you'd
would,
still keep 15
it would
kids
only be
on
the
that
eighth
bench.
graders.
It'd only be eighth grade.
It'd only be eighth
Right.
graders, okay. So the sixth and seventh would have
not for a high school
no
team or for a middle school team.
they'd have travel and GAA.
Exactly.
It's the 7th graders that get the squeeze.
Yeah.
But
So
there's
I
there's
just
fewer
need
kids
a little
playing.
clarification on this. And maybe Peter, maybe you could help because you've got history here. So I'm not doubting you, Chris, but I'm curious about this eighth grade situation. Because how I recall it, and I talked to Guy about this today, so I thought he explained to me the way I understood it. So I'm just gonna try it and then you can tell me where I'm wrong, if I'm wrong. That when we went to two principals, when we were one principal, two assistants, then just like Rockport, kids in the 7th, 8th grade could play on any of our teams, including our high school teams,
Absolutely.
right? So when we went to the two principal model, we knew that was going to be different, that was going to change. But at the same time, we had been kind of revamping our handbook and said, high school sports are for high school kids. But if there are, just like every other team in the league that can't fill all their rosters for high school, eighth graders can be invited.
As long as they didn't have a middle school option, which I
Right.
think is,
Well,
I think that's what we
that
missed.
what I'm questioning on that, I think that's important. But I think what I was questioning is, like, today I was with some superintendents, and one of the guys was Winthrop superintendent. And I asked them at the table, do you have middle school programs? And most of them at the table said they did. And I said, do your eighth graders play varsity? And they said they do, play high school, and they said they do. So I'm not doubting you, but when I asked Guy today, Guy said that's why we do the eighth grade waiver. And when he used to go and get the 8th grade waiver, it was so middle school kids could play, 8th graders could play. Now, I didn't think we were violating the MIAA
We are.
rule, but if we are, then we obviously
We were.
can't.
I should say we were.
Okay.
We're not anymore.
Okay, all right. Okay, so you're like crystal clear, 100%. Okay.
But what if
sat
there
in
aren't,
meetings.
what if there aren't enough high schoolers to fill the junior varsity team?
The
Then
junior
you would-
varsity team?
Well, that's
The
not usually a
freshmen, the
problem, it's the
freshmen.
freshmen.
So what would happen,
What
what's gonna
if there
happen?
weren't enough high schoolers to fill the freshman
Then
team?
you could put 8th graders on it
Even if we have a middle school
No.
program? No.
No.
Okay.
So that's the piece
So
that's.
we could
okay.
not have a girls freshman
There will
team
be,
this
there will be
year.
no freshman girls basketball if we have middle school girls basketball.
Unless ninth graders.
But you don't have them.
Participate.
You just,
If they're ninth graders.
I guess the way you look at it though is you have to fill the demand. I mean, the kids in middle school, we have had a huge amount of people that are interested in the sport. My concern is if you get rid of the sport, it's never gonna come back. I mean, let's be realistic, it won't come back.
That's true.
How can you say to so many kids that you're not gonna offer it? I guess it's just, for me, and full disclosure, I have 2 middle schoolers. I just think that if we get rid of it, it's just sending the wrong message. I really do. And I just think too, like when we say, like in the last meeting, we were saying, well, why should these parents fund the sport? Well, you know what, we have to like give the parents an opportunity to say whether they wanna do that. And I'm not in favor of 100%, you know, but when we cut field hockey, we really didn't even ask the incoming 6th graders if they were interested. We could have had a team.
I don't
We
know.
could, we
don't
don't
know.
know though.
I don't know.
But we figured, okay, last year we didn't, so let's just assume that we don't this year. And I think that assumption was wrong.
But you can't eliminate the fact that there's X amount of dollars. I think that, I mean, you know,
100% agree,
listen, I
right.
wanna make it crystal clear to everybody in the audience on television. If it were up to me, no one would pay a dime to play sports. No one would pay a dime. It should be part of a child's education, and there's no doubt in my mind about that. I benefited when I went to school. I was a 3-sport athlete. I had 3 brothers and sisters who all played 3 sports, and we didn't pay a dime. So that is what we all hope for. Unfortunately, we don't live in those times. And when Chris came, Chris did not come and say, let's cut middle school basketball. His recommendation was option A, which was to increase the user fees across the board. The committee's discussion, if we remember, was, and he said it right, it was not palatable to have everybody's fees after the override where we brought the fees down to go back up to that level. So
In hopes
either-
that we would find money.
and he was asked to go back, and he and Joan went back, and the truth of the matter, when you look at the budget, is the money is in coaches' salaries, game officials, and transportation. We don't even buy uniforms out of our school budget for our teams. We don't buy the basic of supplies, where our parents support that through fundraisers. So it isn't, we're here to talk about something very unpleasant. And so it's really,
It's very
the
difficult.
math, as I said to Ann today, the mathematical formula is easy. If the budget doesn't go up and the user fees don't go up, the expenses go up, we aren't going to be able to afford the
can't
program.
sustain it.
We can't sustain the program. So the thinking was not to put the poor middle schoolers off. There was discussion about what other options might there be. So now, if there's gym time that's freed up from not having the middle school program necessarily, could there be something organized for middle schools that was really a strong club team, intramurals kind of concept where everybody got to play and it cost a whole lot less money. You don't need
Without the
you don't need the travel costs, you don't need necessarily all the transportation. It wasn't that there wasn't going to be some kind of an option explored, because we do know there's a need. We do know that the kids after school should be busy, need to be busy. Many of the kids, however, do have an option in middle school. And I'm just giving you all the arguments. I'm not selling it. I'm not telling you I like any of it. But high school kids, by the time they get there, unless they're really the best of the best, don't really have another in-town option to play. Whereas at the middle school level, we have GAA's got a fabulous opportunity, and then there's, I don't know, all AAU and all those
Right.
other things that are available that parents take advantage of. So they have kids have the opportunity to engage at the competitive level outside of school. And if we could provide an in-school option that more kids could participate in for less cost, that was thrown on the table, not at the exclusion of no other option.
Right.
But you might not have the same competition. You wouldn't be traveling to play.
No.
And I mean, I was asking
might
about the
not.
roster size, just in support of what Barb is saying, that it is a very popular sport. There is a great deal of interest in this town, and a lot of kids that really count on being able to be in middle school basketball. And full disclosure, I have two sons who have not told me yet. I have no plans to sign them up for middle school basketball, so I'm not trying to, I'm just thinking about all of our students.
Right. So the reason the committee's talking about it is that you have the control over the money. Basically, that's it. Operations-wise, the recommendation is that the program, as unpleasant as we feel it is, and is that the middle school program, if we're forced to live within the budget we have, that's the only option unless you choose to increase the user fees. That's an option you have. Or we identify ten to
Another funding
$12,000 somewhere in the budget. And, if you want to go in that direction, my recommendation in talking to Joan about this today is that you really, without taking money away from something else where the money's already earmarked, which is I don't think the road you want to start going down, okay, is transportation, because we have some money left in transportation with the change in the transportation company. But just remember, we've already bailed athletics out by $14,000 with that money because they couldn't meet the budget.
So,
So just understand that this just goes the wrong direction, okay, as far as the money goes. So we do, in calculating what we talked about today, you would have $10,000 left in that transportation line right now. However, remember with the Triple E, we're busing kids to practices, so we don't cancel our sports program.
problem?
We're busing kids to Haverhill. Do you know, Chris, what that's likely? Hopefully, there's a Killing Frost next
Yes.
week, and we don't have to worry about this anymore. But until we get that, we have to come up with Plan B. So do we have any idea what that total cost might be
Well, our average bus cost is $250 a bus
a day?
a day.
and how many
And we-
buses?
It depends on the day. So today we sent 2 buses to Haverhill, so that's $500.
Okay.
And we're also playing all of our home games on the road, which is another $250.
So clearly this isn't going the way that.
No.
Okay, so maybe that's not an option you have, so let me consider something else. Again, I don't think you have really any wiggle room within the budget, but the other option you always have is you can go to school choice. Again, we don't like that, one-time expenses are what we're trying to do out of school choice.
Not sustainable.
But you do have, if you're looking at it for this year, while you reevaluate the whole plan going forward for the sustainability factor, you could potentially go there. And you already pay $33,000 out of school choice. I think we figured that you would have a balance at the end of the year after all the things you're obligated for, given the number of students. Remember, we haven't been filling those slots. We haven't been replacing seniors that have graduated, although we did add kindergarten and first grade this year. We figure you're gonna have somewhere between $50,000 and $80,000 at the end of the year. So if you took 10 to 12, that would just be an expense you would charge against that.
But
You-
we've gone through. I'm gonna guess 5,000 in transportation
Easily. Yeah.
for Triple E, and I'm just thinking 10 days at about $500 each.
Yeah.
And we haven't had a frost yet.
No,
And we don't know when it's coming.
No.
first week in
So-
October, they say.
Really?
I hope they're right.
Oh, wow.
All right, Rob. I'm sorry. You had something.
No, so either, on the A or Z, and going back to in the middle, is there a partnership that could be developed with the district and then the outside sources that have programs in place that would somehow make it easier, more conducive to these young kids playing outside? Is
Well,
there-
I think Chris was talking about maybe offering GAA some of that gym time to maybe see if they could bring some of their travel program down to the afternoon slots. I don't know if that's helpful. I'm not, are you talking about like
Yeah.
GAAs in
Yeah.
every town?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
Just-
we have a travel program.
They have a travel, Russ, can you speak to that? There is a travel program for GAA, right? How does that work?
It's 5th through 8th grade.
It's 5th through 8th grade, based on the limited gym time available within Georgetown. A travel team practices 1 hour a week. at
Okay.
the Pembroke School and plays their games on Saturdays or Sundays at the Georgetown Middle High School. So generally, they have one practice for an hour and 1 to 1.5 games per weekend, because they may have a road game on Saturday and a home game on Sunday.
So if, I'm just wondering, if there was more gym time available, if the middle school program didn't exist, is that possible to, enhance your
Well, there may be something that GAA could do
Yeah.
with the additional gym time.
Yeah,
It would be a little more difficult because
of the
my
time,
recollection is
people aren't available.
middle school practice times were 2:30 to 3:30 or 3:30.
What time were they, Chris?
2:30.
2:30?
Yep, there is 2:30, 3:30, 3:30 to 4:30 in the small gym. So,
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay. Well, I'm just trying to,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to be
but
creative
we could
here,
we
you
could
know?
trade that time. We could make that work
And,
if that's an
you know,
option.
Rob referred to the word partnership.
Yeah.
I have to say at this point that I thought we had a partnership.
Oh, we do.
And I was very disappointed that I was at a GAA basketball preseason meeting last night.
Yeah.
And somebody told me, oh, did you hear the rumor that they're gonna eliminate middle school basketball? I'm really disappointed that GAA wasn't approached about this, and, you know, I heard about it at
Yeah.
some bar last night.
You know, I can certainly see why that's disappointing. I
That's-
didn't know that.
That's not
hap-
much of a partnership.
I didn't know that happened, Russ, you know, I will apologize for that, because we do have a partnership, and that I can understand why you'd be frustrated by that.
But it is, with that being said, and I'm sorry you heard about it that way too.
Yeah.
But right now, at this moment, is there room to, as an idea, does it sound like there's an opportunity there to develop something a little bit more intense? Would it,
Rob,
looking to
give
you
me a little,
guys.
I'm not really following what you are saying.
well,
as
I'm just
far as the
thinking,
program.
I'm thinking right now,
could you
so,
make the time
so
later?
they practice one night a
We
week,
cut into JV
and then they
varsity.
have one game a week,
Varsity go freshman,
typically.
but I don't know.
And what if
Might help.
that,
So Chris, right now, do the boys' middle school team get an hour in the small gym, and then the girls get an hour in the small gym?
Yeah.
That's how it works.
Yeah,
Okay, so there's 2 additional hours available, but now you're talking about.
every day though, right, Russ?
Every day.
Yeah,
But now you're talking about potentially 8 teams, boys and girls, 5th through 8th grade, and
Yeah.
if there were no middle school teams, do we have 8 teams, or now all of a sudden we're gonna balloon to 10 teams within GAA because there is no school option? You know,
I
those
don't
are all
know.
things that would have to be considered. Okay, now those 10 teams have to be squeezed into 2 hours worth of time. But while I'm talking, I'm just gonna run with it right here. From the way I look at it, financially, developmentally, and competitively, if something has to be cut, it's the freshman program that should be cut. Okay, financially, you're gonna save close to twice as much money, certainly more money. Developmentally, I'm afraid you take out the middle school program, in any sport that any kid plays, the more touches on the ball, the better they're gonna get. Okay, so 6th, 7th, and 8th graders now have the opportunity in middle school to practice an hour every day for 3 months. Somewhere around 50 hours, these kids are touching the ball. That if you wipe out that middle school program, for 3 years, potentially for 3 years, those kids are gonna lose out on those 50 hours. Competitively, you wipe out the freshman program, you now have a JV and a varsity program. You got 15 kids for JV, 12 kids for the varsity teams, probable roster sizes. You have the 45 kids that are eligible to play high school basketball, freshmen through seniors. They come to tryouts for the week, and the 27 best kids make the team. I don't care what grade they're in anymore. I don't care if Jimmy, the 11th grader, you know, isn't as good as Ryan, the 9th grader. You take the 27 best kids. Now your teams are more competitive. Your feeder program, your middle school program, and GAA, the kids are getting more development, and you're saving more money. To me, it's a no-brainer that if something has to be cut, it's the freshman team. The competitive nature
more games, Cal.
of basketball, our middle school teams are getting, on the boys' side, are getting croaked because you're taking the best. Last year, they took the best 4 8th graders and put them on the freshman team. So the middle school team was at a complete handicap. And the freshman team didn't have any more success than the middle school team because those 4 good 8th graders are now playing a year above their abilities.
But to be fair, you're just talking about the boys' side. On the girls' side, our eighth grade team, our freshman team made of 8th graders was dominant.
And the girls' middle school
Then they
was
should,
not.
and
Right,
they should
see,
be playing
so,
middle school.
guys, hold on,
Okay.
guys. One person speaks at a time, and you
But-
can talk for 3
so-
minutes.
So like I
So we
said,
can't,
my bottom line is financially, developmentally, and competitively, if something has to be cut, it makes more sense to cut the freshman program and continue with the middle school program.
does anyone else wish to comment one at a time?
An opinion?
And we just have a 3-minute limit.
Just to
And
add-
just, can you just say your name and your address?
Troy. Just to add, if those,
Very
Very
Troy
Troy.
Thurlow.
if those kids don't play middle school, you think your numbers are going down now? You'll have no numbers. You'll have no numbers. You'll be like Rockport. You'll have 9 kids for if you're lucky, 7 for varsity.
Peter. And Peter, comment?
Yeah, Peter, and
I have
then,
a- I have a question
Mrs.
for
Reardon.
Russ. What grade does GAA go to, sorry?
5 through 8.
8. So if a freshman, we didn't have freshman sports, and a freshman got cut, he would have no
No
place to
option.
play
That's right.
basketball, as opposed to an 8th grader
As he stayed with
that
sport.
that wasn't able to play in a middle school team could play in GAA. Is that correct?
Correct, but instead of getting 5 hours a week of middle school practice and/or games, that 8th grader will get 2 hours a week, 1 hour of practice and maybe a game
We give them
in
gym
the
time.
GAA travel program, just because of the, I mean, we would take more gym time, but there's none available.
Why can't the freshmen be on the team of JV and varsity, but they're just not playing in the games?
What, and have them
But
practice?
can I respond
Yeah.
further to Peter's comment?
Yeah.
Okay, so to your
Yeah,
question,
kids try out.
okay, a 9th grader isn't good enough to make the JV or varsity team. So there's 1 year that he's gonna lose developmental time
Leave the sport.
touching the ball. You
They
eliminate
leave the
that middle school program, a kid could potentially lose 3 years of developmental time because there's no program with a 5-day-a-week. So it'll be 3 years lost development versus 1 year for that freshman kid. That freshman kid doesn't make the team, hopefully he's determined enough, he goes out,
They aren't.
gets himself some training, and he makes the team his sophomore year. So he missed 1 year of development. These other kids are gonna lose 3 years.
I don't understand the 3 years.
They do it either.
Because potentially,
There's
if you
no-
don't have a middle school program,
Yeah.
6th, 7th, and 8th grade, that
Oh,
kid
okay,
has
yeah,
nowhere
yeah.
to go to practice every day.
Make a decision.
Okay.
So the.
Oh, hold on.
I think there's one other
Mrs.
lady.
Reardon,
Yeah.
I think you wanted to say
Ellen
something.
Reardon, I have 2 questions. I would like
Can
to
you just say where you live? Laura needs to put it in the
Don't
minutes.
tell him.
I'm Midway in Georgetown.
Very-
I would like if somebody could please explain to me the financial aspect and how you can explain that the middle school program is losing money when we have over 30 children on the boys and girls teams, which equals over $8,000 in user fees. We're only paying for a bus. They share a bus. They played, I think it was 10 games last year. So we paid for a bus to go to 5 games. We paid for referees for 5 games because we only paid for home games. And then we had a coach's stipend. The other thing I wanted to point out to the travel team is a coach for travel team, the girls' travel team, GA, does a fantastic job developing the girls. However, the one practice that we have a week is in a shared gym in Pembroke. So we don't have an hour of a full gym. We have 15 girls and boys in a half of a gym, in a small gym to practice. That's what GAA is doing to develop the program for the girls and the boys. If you lose the middle school program, you are going to lose athletes. They're going to lose interest, and they're not going to continue on into high school. But I would like an explanation on the financials if possible.
Sure.
You got me.
No, it,
You
you
didn't,
wanna
the
go ahead?
coaches stipends alone for both programs are over $10,000. So right there, then you have, officials for, I don't know how many games, the home games, and then, transportation.
And then we also have to allocate out the cost for the athletic director and the athletic office, which is about $2,000 for each team. So each one runs.
Which that wouldn't be a savings. Either way you cut. you
No,
have to
either way,
roll that
right,
money into
exactly,
some other
right,
bucket.
right.
So what is that total, if you would, per team?
Without those costs, and I think that's what we were confused
Yeah.
today with the emails, was if we just looked at the salaries, the officials, and the transportation costs before the transportation went up, it was 15,724 as a total. But our transportation went up a little bit with our new contract, so I don't have the detail on that, but it was over 15,000.
But at the middle school level, let's assume 4 home games, 4 away games. So it's $1,000 for a bus, for the 4 buses, based on what Chris just said. It's about $500 for the referees, because they're $112 per game. And you're saying $5,000 for the coach.
For
So-
each coach.
Right.
For each coach.
But, okay, so boys, 5,000 for a coach, 500 for a referee, that's 5,500.
In the budget, I wasn't here when it was developed, but they had $1,740 for officials.
That's grossly overstated because it's $112 a game for a referee. So I don't know
How
what
the
that,
budget
I don't
was
know where that
taken.
number comes from.
I don't have it in front of me, but do you have the number of games played?
4?
No, it's more than
No, I
that.
don't have the.
Projected road games are 4, so we'd have
I
home
just have
games
your
would be
totals.
6.
But that's actually times 2 because they share a bus.
See it? I have the
Kind of
total.
complicated.
I don't have the.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
1740, and then a little over 1,000 for
Yep.
each of the,
Yeah, so when we do a bus, the boys and girls share to the road sites. Going to a place like Rockport or Manchester does cost more because it's further away. So that is something to think
Well,
about.
that's why I'm giving you the benefit. On
Right.
the boys' side, the cost for the boys' middle school team is $5,000 for a coach.
Yep.
$1,000 for the bus. Then they'll
It's
give
more-
you
it's more than that.
250 times 4.
But it's more than
It's
that.
more
No,
than,
but it's not, because we're, even if we do 500,
okay, you know what? I don't think we're gonna get anywhere arguing, like, the points of the numbers. I think the bigger issue is,
Fee doesn't cover it, that's the point.
that the user fee isn't covering.
But I think my
costs.
question was, I would like to understand how that is, and I don't think you answered that, because I think we disagree on the numbers. So I think as citizens of the town, taxpayers, we have a right to understand how you can say that it doesn't cover it. Am I wrong?
You're not wrong, but at this meeting, the purpose was not to go through the numbers. It was to review his recommendation and not to go line by line. We had this discussion back when we did the budget to actually establish the athletic budget.
But I think it's something to talk about, though, that you should understand what the numbers are, and maybe right now at this meeting isn't the way to do it, but you should be able to understand that. So I'm not sure where I'm going with that, but I
Wouldn't
think,
the discussion that you had in your budget
Right.
meeting be recorded in the minutes of that meeting?
I'm sure it's in our budget books.
Our budget's transparent. It's not like we're
Yeah,
hiding
it's
money.
not.
I mean,
But
it just
how
to,
would- how
to
would she-
answer her
how would she
question,
get
how
that
could she
information,
get
though?
that
Because
information?
As a parent, she should be able to have that information,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
transparency is great.
I can tell you that I'm looking at a spreadsheet that has totals in it for the different categories. When Chris came over to my office, he had his thumb drive, which actually I think was what helped build the spreadsheet, that had the calculation behind. I have officials, each official costs $1,740 for the boys, $1,740 for the girls.
That's for the year?
Yes, and in his spreadsheet, he had a calculation that gave us that. Then we budgeted, so you have 10,000, each coach is 5112, so you have that times 2. Each official, 1,740 times 2, and then each bus was $1,071. But that bus cost is increased because of our new contract, somewhat, because of the wait times. So, I mean, if you just take those numbers, it's $15,724 without increased transportation.
Right.
And with our current user fees, with 30 kids, you collect $8,400.
When you say current, are you saying 255 or 325?
280.
280.
Okay, what
Which
about
is the
the,
255 plus the 25.
Right, so it's 280 times 30 kids is $8,400.
Yep.
So that
Okay.
means, you know,
You need $7,000.
we
to
need
run.
$7,324 to run it at the current user fee,
Right.
with a little wiggle
But
room for
that still
transportation.
doesn't cover, I mean,
or understand why it says 1742 when the cost of officials is $448 for 4 games. That number,
That
for
sounds
some
like
reason,
there's
They
is
played more than 4
stated
games.
Is there a way to
$1,300.
research
Can we simply verify that?
Yeah, but they played more than 4
okay,
games.
wait,
No, not at
okay,
this- not at this
time,
moment.
everybody,
Not
just,
at this
let's just
9
stop.
total, so they might have played 5.
Let's just stop for a minute. The issue, so maybe we're off by $1,000. Maybe. I'm not sure. We're gonna have to go back and figure that out. The bigger issue is we have $12,000 we need to, 12,000 plus or minus 1,000. If we give on that number, we just need to figure out what it is. We need to figure out where we're gonna fund that. I mean, I still, and this is more of a committee issue, I still wrestle with what I'm hearing about specifically the freshman girls program last year. If, that it was all filled with 8th graders.
Is that correct?
Yes,
So,
And those kids are getting
The
good
whole freshman
competition,
team
that's
was 8th
part of the.
graders.
for the
So-
girls.
so I get concerned that if we wipe out a middle school program, then where are those girls gonna come from to go to the JV and the varsity teams later on? As opposed to keeping the middle school program intact and kind of spreading our wealth, if you will, between the two schools. Because then you're allowing the girls to play completely through middle school, the boys as well, but the situation seems more critical for the girls.
I think the other thing to think about, I did come up with the extra cost as a scoreboard operator. That's part of it,
Why does someone have to be paid?
because we've traditionally paid that person.
Because we traditionally paid that person?
Yep.
So because that's the way we've always done it. So $1,200
Okay, let's-
is going to a scoreboard operator?
It's another part, it's another cost that we didn't talk about.
Okay, you know what, we're
sorry.
not, we can't go
Chris,
through,
that's fine.
we know there's plus or minus
Yeah, there's other things.
1,000 or 1,500 in there, that's off, but we're still over.
I think we should get back to your focus, that you're gonna save more money and cutting the freshman program,
but-
and it's a
Okay.
better option.
I mean, I do want to respond to Ann's question. The other thing to think about is 8 teams in the Cape Ann League do not have a middle school program. They're doing fine. They have great youth programs like we do, and I appreciate everything you guys do. And they have competitive freshmen, JV, and varsity, with the exception of Rockport, as you pointed out, which is a very good point.
That's where you're gonna head.
But size-wise, like when I look at the size of the schools, I think we're probably the smallest when you look at Rockport, Ipswich, and what'd you say, Manchester?
We're larger than Rockport.
We are?
We are.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Overall, we are.
So when I look at Rockport, which we know is not doing as well, Manchester, Essex, and Ipswich, we're small. We're right on the bottom with Rockport size-wise.
Rockport also does not have a freshman program, as I recall. Correct.
On the girls' side.
They have a middle school program.
But you're still only
no
talking
freshman
about 15
program.
kids. The roster can only be as big as it is.
Well, no, we expand the roster pretty freely.
Only
We have for-
when it's 1 or 2 kids that
For the last
it
3
means
years,
they'd
we've
have to cut.
expanded it.
Well, people argue that our roster sizes are too high. Remember, we have a lot of people in town who'd be very happy if our rosters on basketball were 10 kids.
Right.
But the handbook that we developed said that we weren't cutting unless there was a minimum of 15 children on the roster. So when you see 16, 17 kids, that's only when there's literally 2 kids that need to be cut. Otherwise, if there are more people out for the team, then they make the cuts. The situations that have come to my attention, it's only been because there were just a couple of kids.
Didn't baseball, the
and to
two
cut
teams
them.
each carry 18 kids last year for a sport that plays 9 on the field?
We have in our handbook, Russ, minimum numbers before kids are cut, and that's what the coaches have been working with. Now, that's a philosophical, I told you, that's a philosophical discussion that we're not gonna resolve today, but that's all in our handbook. We're trying to be true to what we said we were going to do.
I just hate looking,
Hold on, I think Mr. Lacasse, did you?
Oh, okay.
Rick Lacasse.
Rick Lacasse from Chelmsford, North Street.
No,
Just a question back to the finances. When we had mentioned that there was a meeting this summer that raising the user fees was unpalatable, was there something significant changed from when we did the override, when it was palatable to reduce the user fees, to now that we can't go back because it's unpalatable?
Because one of the things when we did the override, one of the items that we listed was to use some of that funding to reduce user fees.
And that's one of the reasons I did vote for that, but was there not did something significantly change that was actually a good idea to propose reducing the user fees? That they were okay to reduce last year, but they're unpalatable to go up this year? I guess I'm confused of why.
I'm not following your question, I'm sorry.
I guess the question is, why did we reduce the user fees last year? If in 1 year, without hearing a lot of things that have changed, we need to raise them back up again?
The problem being is that our costs keep going up and we can't,
So there was something that was different?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, actually, to be truthful, the last 2 years in athletics, we didn't end on the positive side. We had to actually take $14,000 to $16,000 out of school choice because the combination of the user fees and what's in the budget did not keep pace with what the cost of the program ended up being.
The other piece that goes into it is the minute our numbers start to fall, we have fixed costs
Right.
that start to go up.
We used to have 600 athletes, I'd say 3 or 4 years ago. Peter would have to help us with that. And
640.
640, we're down to
640,
529.
And we're down to 540, so that,
So I
that's
guess
been
that
a
your
problem.
your statement that we were below last year, or last 2 years, we've still been below. Why would we have reduced the user fees if we still weren't covering it?
Well, again, the anticipated cost of the program was more than what we had budgeted for. The business manager at the time said this is the calculation he used, and truth be told, he probably did go down lower than he probably could have, but we thought the numbers were gonna go up as we lowered the user fee. That was a calculated risk that we took, and it didn't end up being that we ended up with more athletes.
Can I ask a question to that?
Can you just state your name and
My
address?
name's Michael Reardon from Longview.
Okay.
If your school handbook stipulates that you're only gonna take 15 kids on a team, and your train of thought by lowering user fees was to increase participants, if you're only taking 15 kids to a team, how do you think you're gonna increase participants?
We have other sports that we're not able to fill the rosters on.
So, then would the question be to cut some of the other sports that you can't fill rosters on, other than the sports that you can fill rosters on?
They're not complete, we're not talking that of 15 plus, they're in the 10 to 11 range. They're, football last year, I can't remember the big.
32
32
total.
kids.
This year?
Last year. We're up
Last
to
year.
41 now.
And we have 41 now.
I mean, I'm not a proponent for cutting any of kids' sports. But if
Absolutely
you're
not.
telling me the basketball's meeting its numbers.
Well, it's
and-
meeting its numbers, but it's not covering its costs.
That's right.
That's the problem.
That's the difference.
George Dow from Bald Pig Road.
Thank you, George.
What's kind of counterintuitive about this argument that I see is that we've cut the user fees, and a year later, we're coming back and saying, well, now we're gonna cut the team, and it's unpalatable to increase the user fees. That just doesn't make any sense to me. If we shouldn't have cut the fees before, why are we avoiding raising the fees now?
Well, what's interesting is we've looked at fees. We did a $25 fee increase, and we
Raise
also
an increase of $25.
looked at raising them up higher to see what we would need to fund it, and it just becomes a number that, I mean, from my perspective, is unpalatable. I don't know where the rest of the committee is on it, but we looked at $350. I mean, and that doesn't cover us. We still have a $12,000 deficit in athletics. So at what point? I mean, 500 divided by 12.
If we raise it to 350,
But
Yeah.
what would be,
to take it to the other extreme, you tell me that my
43,000.
my child doesn't need to play middle school sports if there's other alternatives. There's AAU teams. Do you know what an AAU team costs to put a son or a daughter on?
I do.
Okay, so you think $350
times.
is unpalatable to me? For my child to play school sports as opposed to AAU sports at $700, $800 a sport?
That's
I mean,
but we
all
have
honesty.
but we have to look at all the students, and we have to balance. I mean, we have to look at the whole district.
I understand we have to look at the whole district and everything else, but I mean,
One of the issues.
we're talking double the cash to play an AAU sport as opposed to playing a school sport.
Right.
At your higher calculations, that would make the school profitable on their sports at $350 a head.
One of the issues that I remember the board struggling hard with on the user fees was how high they were in relationship to other towns, and then going up even higher with the user fees, and people who don't have that money, it became some people have and some people don't have, and that was very hard for the board to come to terms with, which was part of, I think, what went into, not going back up with
In the
these.
same year, people's taxes went up significantly. I think,
There was that
the
override.
committee heard that too, it's
There's
hard
a
to
lot
make
of-
it all match.
So I think just quickly looking at this, we'd have to raise across the board user fees to $435 per sport to balance our
yeah, we
budget.
fund it
100%. That would wipe out our 12. So that's fine for basketball because you're still getting a deal, if you will, because it's about $650 to $750 per person. But when you're looking at, I'm going to say cheering, wrestling, I think is another low. There's a few other low ones in there.
Country,
Middle school track.
Yeah.
So
They basically subsidize basketball.
The $12,000 that you're talking about, I'm having a hard time understanding whether that's the deficit in the basketball program or.
That's
the
total
deficit-
athletic deficit.
Okay, so why is there not, I mean, and we can argue about numbers, because I don't like the numbers at all anyway, but given that the numbers are what they are, why is there not a middle ground choice here of what is the deficit the basketball program has to make up to continue and give the public the opportunity to raise those funds?
Well, it's interesting because I looked at what would it cost to get middle school basketball at the whole, and it would be $650 per
What was the
per
figure you
player.
just did?
5 something, but
Yeah.
that was without the added piece of Chris
I
and the
wrote
trainer.
524
Yeah.
because of what
Yeah.
you said, yeah.
So
But again, it starts putting some family members
it
in
does-
places
But some of
that.
those-
The
but some of
public
those numbers
schools, and
may
we
be
don't
wrong.
feel that.
Right, but when you
students
overall,
can afford it.
But
It's a
some-
650 figure. Is that 650 additional?
no, $650 total. So it'd be the cost of an AAU program.
Over $400 per basketball player to make it whole. And 30-something kids playing the middle school team, doesn't that come out to the $12,000 shortage of the entire athletic budget, not the basketball budget?
But there are other. The thing is, if you go you have to go sport by sport. It's not.
But you just said that the deficit was $12,000 for the entire athletic budget,
Right.
not the basketball budget. But yet you want to charge it all to the middle school basketball team, the $12,000. I mean, if we're gonna go and spread it out over every sport, it's not an additional $400 for a basketball player.
Claire, you-
It's the
you're
entire
saying
athletic
7,
budget.
right?
It shouldn't
No,
come down on one sport to a middle school sport.
10, I say 7.
You say 7
Because
to 10.
you're considering all the other costs, but we have to pay them anyways,
Right.
so.
So there's a $12,000 deficit right now. If
He
you
needs to
eliminate
have an
middle school
explanation.
sports,
So if it's $7,000.
what are you gonna save? $7,000?
$7,000. I mean, yeah.
So there's a $12,000 on
$7,000.
top of already not having that in the budget.
Right.
You're gonna save $7,000. If you eliminate the freshman program, you're gonna save about $12,000.
Right. So
There's
that's.
your deficit, all wiped out.
Again, remember the coaches want the freshman program, the 2 varsity coaches. I think
Right,
that's
but
important.
here's the
Okay, but-
here's
but
the
the
issue.
coaches work for the citizens of the town,
Thank you.
okay? The town doesn't work for the coaches. The coaches work for
So
the
I think,
town.
you know what, I think what we need
No,
to
it's-
do as a committee
it's not
is,
true.
we need to decide, one, he's made his recommendation to eliminate middle school basketball. So our options are find a funding source, ask him to go back and look at middle school basketball and freshman basketball and see if moving freshmen or eliminating freshmen and keeping middle school is a more viable option from all perspectives.
The other thing is time is a factor. The schedule is made,
To make the schedule.
and basically the league is asking me, "Are you in? Are you out?" Because they have, everyone else is hinging on that.
So what is the schedule?
What's the time that we need to?
They won ASAP. They went last week. I
We wanted
mean,
it last week. That's why we said it has to be on this discussion, it has to be tonight.
Well, can't we reach out to them and say, I mean, I'm willing to put in whatever time it takes from now until, say, Monday to look at it. I
agree.
do agree with what Russ is saying. I do think that, those 3 years of the kids, I know they can play GAA, I know they can play travel, but it's different. Middle school sports are different than playing against, your friends in GAA. I'm just thinking that, when you say that 8 KPN schools, got rid of their programs, that doesn't mean that it's right, doesn't mean that it's right for our district. And I just think tonight, putting this all together and seeing the emotions that are going on, I just think that it would be beneficial for all of us to just take the time to maybe go through, maybe it is right for the freshman team to go.
But that's an operations issue,
It's-
so,
see,
so
okay,
you
that
have to
makes-
keep that separate. Your role
Our-
is, if you want to come up with, I'm happy, you wanna save the program, it's fine. You just have to find the money. And at the end of the day, I think maybe you should do a little straw
And
poll
that's-
here and to see where the committee is, because if the majority of the committee wants to see the basketball program at the middle school maintained, then we find the fund. Then it's easy. We have to find the
That's what you're saying,
funding.
is that we have funds, and what we haven't discussed, and I'm not sure that this is the place to have that discussion, is if we decide we want to save that program and we want to allocate those funds, what's the downside to us choosing as a committee to allocate funds to keep the middle school basketball program?
There isn't a downside to it. Except you've got to find the money, right?
It's gotta come
That's
out
really
of
it.
some-
So,
comes out of
so if the,
something else.
I've told you a couple places that you can look.
Right.
And again,
All of them
I
not
mean, that's a pretty easy
sustainable.
solution
Right,
if
but
you come up with the
they're
money.
not, they're not sustain, I understand, so
Yeah.
that's a good point. They're not
not
sustainable
sustain- right.
solutions, but they're solutions that would keep this program
For
in the
this year.
school for this year.
That's right.
And then we can look at this when does it come up again? When we do the budget for
Budget.
next year?
When we do the budget
And
for
we-
next year. Yep.
And again, keep in mind, you're gonna lose your freshman girls basketball team if you do this, whether, for better or worse.
I don't understand.
Because he's
The numbers
saying
aren't
the
there.
8th grade numbers,
Okay.
the 8th grade girls won't be able to play.
Okay.
Oh.
Excuse me, that's not true, okay, because, first of all, your freshman team last year was all 8th graders that are freshmen this year, okay? So you're only talking about the 7th, 8th graders that will actually be able to play middle school now, okay? So you
But all
really
those-
don't have freshman
Talking
kids that are
long-term,
playing.
yeah.
The freshman kids, they already played freshmen.
Right, but they're gonna move up.
Correct, they're gonna move up to JV.
Yeah.
So you're only talking about 7th, 8th grade girls, is really the number you're looking at, okay? And again, I'm only gonna state this again, just based on Rockport, when you have to look at the future here, okay? Because this decision's gonna impact down the road. MIA is already looking at putting Georgetown in Division III, okay? We get our butts kicked already, okay? But I know, my kid's been in there for 6 years, okay? We already get our butts kicked. You're gonna move up a division and then you're gonna start losing girls? Kids won't, you're not gonna have a program. You're gonna be worse than Rockport. You'll have 5 kids if you're lucky. So then you'll have no basketball. You won't have to worry about any budget.
Just another member of the public, and then we're just gonna stop the
Real quick
going back
question,
and
Mr.
forth.
DeFranco, you say there are 8 towns that have cut their middle school program and they're fine. Can I ask you what towns those are? Are they proportionately the same size as Georgetown, or are you talking about much larger towns that have more children that would be interested in playing versus the town size of Georgetown?
I hadn't considered that before when they mentioned, Manchester, Rockport, and Ipswich are the ones that have it, and they are some of the smaller schools.
Right.
But Winfield is.
The ones that have cut those, what I'm
Right,
curious.
yeah, they're the ones that have kept it.
Gotcha.
But Winfield's a similar size, Hamilton Wenham is obviously bigger, Amesbury is bigger, Masconomet, you can run down the whole.
So the ones that have cut it and are fine are bigger towns than Georgetown? Is that what you're saying?
With the exception of Winfield.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so as a committee, our choice, we have to decide whether we want to ask Mr. DeFranco to go back and look at middle school versus freshman, see if that alternative from it, and whether he wants to do that, whether we want to identify a funding source or nothing. I guess those are really our 2 options as a committee. Bear in mind, it's his job to determine how the athletic budget's gonna work. That it's an operations issue, with Carol, and the administrative team to work through that budget.
Can I just ask one more question about this issue of losing the freshman girls basketball team? I mean, isn't there fluctuation from year to year in how many students at each grade level are going to play? And do you make a decision that affects the entire program going forward based on what could be an anomaly for this year?
I would say, well, again, I coached freshman basketball for 6 years, and I coached middle school for 1 year. And the freshman numbers traditionally have a lot of middle schoolers. The girls almost exclusive. The boys, it varies. I've had teams that had 6 freshmen, 6 middle schoolers. I've had teams that were all freshmen, teams that were closer to all middle school. So it really does vary from year to year.
Right.
But the problem is, just like if you cut middle school basketball, if you cut freshman basketball, it's going to be very hard to get back. So it's the same problem.
But when you look at the thing that I really struggle with is we have a high school with 400 students in it, and we're going to have 3 levels of boys and girls teams. So we're going to have 6 basketball teams for 400 students, and we're going to have a middle school of 400 roughly, and we could have none. So I still get back to just distributing back, giving the high school two teams for each, for boys and girls, and then one for the middle school. I just, I have to believe that it's gonna really help them. I just think it'll give them an alternative, if you will.
And I think at some point we do have to have a philosophical discussion about middle school athletics in general.
Yeah.
Because most of the teams in the league don't have them anymore.
Right.
And we have to think about what do we want to do with that. We used to have a very strong middle school soccer program. It's gone. We used to have a very strong middle school field hockey program. It's gone. So, do we...
But why don't we keep revisiting that? Like, like when the new sixth graders come in and see if they are showing interest, because I just think by going by saying, last year we didn't have the numbers, so this year we might not, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Well,
Because I do
Middle school
know,
soccer went away because of lack of interest.
Yeah.
Over time, for a period of time, was very
But
successful.
That's not an issue with middle school basketball.
Right. So, okay, I think, as a committee, we just need to decide what route we're gonna take. Do we wanna look for a funding source? Bearing in mind, it's not sustainable. And if we go with that funding, then we won't be funding other, things that could come up. It'll be coming out of
And the funding
choice.
source is how much?
We need $12,000.
12.
10 to 12.
I thought we said 7 to 10. Yeah, Joan is thinking
Well,
7, you're thinking 10,
Because
so.
she's looking at the distributed cost across.
Yes, that's
Right,
what we
the-
had said in there.
Ann's looking at the distributive cost of what we needed to balance. We
there's a
just,
little bit of
we
the
just looked at
ADA.
middle school basketball.
Right, yeah.
but I
Absolutely.
think
Singularly.
what
Yeah.
we need as a committee though is a number. We don't need like 7 to 12. We need to know exactly how much we're
Well,
looking at.
I'm looking at option A, which has 350. Are we in option A or B? I can't remember.
Yep,
B
we're
is the-
you picked option B. Option
Okay.
A was the 350.
So option B has total expenses of 288, user fees of 160, revenue of 17, budget of 65. So total budget user fees and revenue is 243, less 288 is 45,000. And we take 33 out of choice already. So I'm assuming that $50,000 to $80,000 number had the 33 of choice
Correct.
taken out. So to me, 45 minus 33 is 12.
Okay.
So we need 12.
So remember that, yeah, because that didn't include middle school basketball, so that makes sense.
I kind of like what Alana was saying about we could look at this again when the budget comes up next time, for next year, and just fund what we have in place and find, and it's not sustainable, but we would revisit the question of keeping the freshman team when we review next year's budget. When we
But
build,
come up with a funding source.
but we
now.
come up with a funding source now for this year, that's my.
Okay. So let's be clear that last year we ended in a deficit. And
We can't end in a deficit
we,
this year.
we will eliminate the possibility to end in a deficit. We can't. So what do we do when our numbers start to fall apart? Which is my concern.
Well, what do you think?
We gotta recruit or something here, right?
No, I guess that's my bigger concern is if we go down this road of funding, like identifying a funding source and using that, that's fine. But if our numbers start to fall apart, we've already committed 12, so we're down to a very limited pool to continue to fund.
And if we
When
have
you
an
say the
emergency
numbers
like we
start
have
to
right
fall
now.
apart,
And he just brings up a good point. That
Numbers
means
the rosters don't get filled.
we know basketball is going to get filled,
basketball will, right,
but we have other sports to consider.
okay.
Can I
So-
ask one question?
If those don't fill, then we're in.
Then we're gonna need to fund those,
Then we need
and
to.
we'd be,
We'll need to
okay.
fund the difference, and we're already about $5,000 that we've spent on transporting students to
That
Haverhill.
will take out of the transportation line.
Right.
Which would lend, if the numbers did fall apart, so to
Right.
speak, then that would lend a different tone to our discussion when we build next year's budget.
No, we'll have to do it this year. Like if spring sports
Right,
don't
right,
come
I
in-
understand we would do it this year.
No,
yes.
no, for this year's
We can't
budget.
end
Oh,
the
for
year
this
in
We
year.
can't
negative.
end the year in
Oh,
a
okay.
deficit.
Okay.
So what you're saying is hypothetically, if the rosters for, say, spring sports don't fill and you come to us looking for money so that we can have,
We
Excuse
can't
me for
end the
being-
year in the red.
Excuse me for being ignorant about what the sports, the seasons are, but in the spring, we may say, sorry, no money.
Right.
If we say yes now, we're looking at saying to another sport in the spring, we can't help you out, you gotta fold your program.
We could be. I don't know that
We
that will
don't- we can't
happen.
predict
We hope
that.
not. We hope
We
not.
don't, we
hope
hope
not.
not.
It's all based off
But what
the
we,
I mean, thinking about what we have in the spring, I don't anticipate that.
softball's scary.
Yeah.
Oh, it's softball. That's true, softball.
Softball, boys and girls lacrosse, middle school track,
Those-
and
those-
baseball
those
are our
full,
spring.
Boys and girls lacrosse, right?
Boys and girls lacrosse are strong. Baseball's very strong. Softball, the numbers have been
Yeah.
going down.
Yeah, okay.
the numbers have been going down progressively over the years, you're
Yeah.
saying we have fewer and fewer, so if we had to make a decision to cut softball this year versus basketball, where you're saying the numbers are going up, where we have.
Well,
a
they're
strong-
they're
Strong.
capped.
We don't have a
We
middle
can't
school
go.
softball program.
No.
That would make more sense.
And a lot of you have brought up a really good point, and I think this is the point, that the problem with basketball is it's 15 kids on a roster, but their costs are the same or greater than a sport like football or cross country or cheering, where we have 20, 25 kids. And I love basketball. I absolutely do. It's my second favorite sport. And I absolutely love it, and I hate to see it cut. And we're trying to do everything we can, but sometimes we have to make tough decisions.
Now, back to the costs again. I think that 1,700 should and could be evaluated for savings, because you have a whole school full of kids that are required to do 10 hours worth of community service during the year. Is it really necessary to pay some kid to sit at the scores table and do
We'll go through it. He can go through those
I actually
numbers.
looked at the Cape Ann handbook, and it actually says that an adult is supposed to be doing the clock and the scorebook. But, I mean, there's some costs, I think, that
There's some
could
very
be
mature students.
Yeah, that could be evaluated. And a question, how are the coaches' salaries determined?
It's the union.
They're negotiated, Russ.
The teacher's contract.
Teacher's
In the
contract was
teacher's
just,
contract.
Okay, so if I were to apply for a coaching position at the high school, even though I'm not involved in the union,
Correct.
you still have to pay me the
Correct.
Yeah.
union wage?
Mhm.
Can he go for a lower?
Where do you get
rate
those
wage?
applications? I mean, because when
We'd be
you
happy
think
to
about
give them to you.
$5,000 for a guy that
Argument I've already-
spends probably 50 hours, he's getting $100 an hour to coach the freshman and middle school team.
I get it, Russ, but
It's
it's a
obscene.
negotiated number.
Okay,
I'm
moving
willing
right,
something gets posted.
moving right along.
I'm still feeling the way I stated
Okay.
earlier.
That's fine.
Well, is that where you're thinking, Alana?
Yes.
And that's what Pam's thinking. What are you thinking, Rob? Might as well just do it quick.
I'm struggling with the money part.
But there's another thing that we also have to be really mindful with on the money side. We asked for a $250,000 warrant article on Monday. If that is
There's
not funded,
There's a big picture.
if that for extraordinary expenses, which knock on wood will be funded, if that's not funded, and those expenses come to fruition, which we believe there's going to be a strong probability that the majority of it will, we're going to be forced to fund it with our budget,
Which means reductions.
which means
this year's
mid-year reductions. And I'm not I'm not scaring anybody,
Right,
but
no.
the reality of it is I had to sit there Monday night and ask for that. So if it doesn't get funded, we're going to need to do something.
No, that's a good point. Barbie, what are you thinking?
Well, I know what we had to ask for on Monday, and it's unfortunate that we had to ask for it, but the way I look at it is, this, I really hate to see it go. Whatever I think we
I'm
need to
not
do right now. is
proposing to
just
let
look-
it go.
No,
I'm
and
just-
no, but we need to look at this right now and say, okay, this is important to us, it's important to a lot of people, and I think it's worth the time that we're all willing to put into it, to figure it out.
Well, I'm not sure there's anything to figure out.
I was going to say, we don't have anything to figure out. Do we
it's
want to
just-
identify a funding
It's
source?
just,
Find the
that's
money.
really what you're down to. Because I'm hearing that you have the
Why couldn't you
majority, yeah.
fundraise? Why, I don't understand why you couldn't. The varsity girls went out and fundraised $3,000 last year in 2 weeks for uniforms. We can't fundraise across the board for $12,000?
Have you considered asking the parents
I
how
find that hard
maybe
to
you could
believe.
come up with the money?
It's the issue with fundraising, and we can't keep going back and forth with this, but the issue with that is it's still not sustainable. Then we're required, every year
true.
to go out to balance
We'll
out.
fundraise every year. How about instituting a gate fee?
There, you know what? There,
That's a sustainable fee.
it
I'm
is.
gonna go watch my daughter play every game. If it costs me $5 to go to the game and go watch my daughter play, I'm gonna pay the $5 every time I go to the game.
It's like you're not trying. You're not trying to
I
find a
mean,
way.
there are ways to.
Wait, I think I'm
We're-
hearing the committee saying that the majority of the committee is looking for a funding source, so you're
Yeah.
kind of getting what you want, so
We
let's
do
just
wanna
relax
try.
a minute here.
We do want to try to find a way.
Let's try to,
But we
let's
have to
try
be mindful
fair
of the
here.
fact that we have to be prudent and do something that's sustainable. Because we're all gonna be back here next year having the same conversation about another sport.
But I do think a lot of good points were brought up, like the gate, I think that's great, the gate fee. I think fundraising, I mean,
They're all
I
creative
love
ideas that
fundraising.
we
I'll
can think
fundraise
about.
as much as anyone wants to help me with it. I think there are some good points though,
Right,
where we can come up with the money other than the budget.
Why are we here at this meeting tonight, having to make this decision tonight versus
Actually,
having to?
the decision is to either, we don't have to vote on anything. It's an operations decision that's through Carol, through Mr. DeFranco. It's his recommendation to balance the athletic budget.
So it's Mr. DeFranco, then you're saying, who perhaps could solicit parents' input on where the money could come from, and if parents have ideas
Well,
about fundraising, that's what I'm wondering. We're hearing these ideas and these parents saying, ask us for the money, and we're standing here going, no, we gotta look at our budget for the money.
Well,
And they're saying, ask us for the money, we'll help you. Why aren't we here? Whose job is it to listen to them say, ask us for the money? Whose job is that?
It's our job to do that, but we also have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that what we're deciding and what we're doing is sustainable.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, we can absolutely, I mean, if someone wants to drop $12,000 in our lap or fundraise $12,000, that's fantastic, but what do we do next year when we're balancing our budget? Where does that
But what
funding?
if there's an instituted, if there's some, I mean, when I was in school, I remember doing a lot of fundraising for the things that I participated in.
Right.
And you knew they were coming every single year, because that was just part of the school cycle, and if you participated in this, you went out and you raised money.
And
schools
I
do
agree,
accept
and I think if
gratefully
you really
donations
look at how much money
for specific
the parents
programs.
already fundraise in this town, they buy uniforms, that mean, I've
But
had
I
parents,
don't
see,
think
there's
it's
two
our
sides,
position,
there is
Carol.
two
Let's-
sides to the issue. And there are parents who feel like, I can't do anymore. So
Absolutely.
I think, maybe there's a way you can do it where the committee finds money, and then if people choose to want to get money together and then donate it back to the school, then this committee can apply it to the lines that they're spending, and it can
parents
work.
do.
It certainly can work both ways.
I mean, if you look at what we approve every week in donations, it's
We approve
amazing.
donations,
So it's
yes.
not that we're not appreciative and,
Yeah.
realize that parents do a lot
It's
for
just
us.
what are the
Very grateful.
mechanisms, I guess, is that, it sounds to me like there's parents in the audience here who are saying, don't take our sport.
Right.
Help us understand the mechanisms whereby we can bring money in to fund the sport. And so I wanna know
I'd
what
say
is,
join the boosters.
what do
Right.
we do?
We
have-
have the
what
all
do we
sports.
tell them?
We have the all sports boosters.
Right.
Join them and figure out how they're doing their fundraising and what they're doing with it. And how they-
I think that's a great idea. I think that's, part of the other side of being
We're
on
gonna
the
cut the
school
program,
committee.
but you want me to be an all-sports boosters member?
That supports the high school.
Okay,
not
you
middle
know what?
school.
We have to decide as a committee how to do this.
Part of our job also is that we're a public school, and I'm only speaking for myself, but there are people who have no more money to give. And I appreciate that there are people out here that want to do this, and as you're saying, but probably some people that aren't sitting here, and that's not consistent with a public school. And that's part of the picture too.
In terms of raising user fees, I mean, there's a lot of people, these are public schools, and if you raise user fees very high, then you end up with the kids who can afford it get to play, and the kids who can't afford it don't get to play, and that's not the concept of public education.
But if you don't raise the fees, nobody gets to play. The program goes away, nobody gets to play.
You can let the free market decide. But
Well, I mean, there's no doubt that over time,
Our
the fees are
issue,
gonna go up.
guys, we still
is.
need to, we can argue every point on this, whether we raise user fees, whether we sell T-shirts, whether we cut every sport or no sports. But at the end of the day, our decision is, do we want to identify a funding source?
Right.
Do we want to look at another option?
Well, so Ann, if we do that, if that's what the committee says, how do we go about doing that? Like, is it, I understand you need to get back to, MIAA as far as where we're going with it, so what time frame are we looking at? If now?
Tonight.
Tonight.
Okay, like-
If I hear the commit, I mean, so I think that there are at least 3 people on this committee, at least 3. I can't quite get where Rob is right now, but there are at least 3 people on this committee that said they'd like to identify a funding source. So I'm offering you an option, and that is choice. That is the only thing that does not impact the budget in a way that means we have to cut something else that we were planning to do already.
What is left in choice after that?
Well, we were talking about that today. Based on what we've committed to in choice, we anticipate we're going to have between $50,000 and $80,000 left at the end of the year as a balance. So obviously, we got issues with sustainability on that too. But
And we confirm the number of students that are choicing in. We know our revenue is accurate.
based to the extent that we can know our revenue is accurate in. As I said, we brought in, remember, 10 kids this year also, so that added a little bit of revenue. So if you needed to take $12,000, I believe you would have the money. You're not going to in a deficit for school choice. But again, everything's a trade-off, right? So if you have some kind of extraordinary emergency, that's not a source you can go to. Because it just isn't. But this particular situation, if you're looking for a source tonight, that's where I would suggest you go, and Joan and I are in agreement with that recommendation.
And I think for myself, considering the nature of the townspeople who are here and getting a distinct feeling that this is all last minute for them in terms of responding to this and not getting the information, I'm willing to go along with the other three, with a very strong caveat that I will not do that again next year. And there'll have to be a solution next year, well in advance, where we need your input, and we work this thing out to the best of our ability so that we avoid coming back just like we're doing tonight.
Much of this information is new to me too, and that would give us time to really consider and look at the freshman team and what would be all of the
Yeah.
implications of not funding
And
them
you might
the
find some of
next
that money
year.
when the girls' freshman team doesn't exist. The money that would have gone to that
That's right.
will
That's right.
come back
That might
in.
work, yep.
Yeah.
What's not having a girls'
Well,
freshman team?
Well, he's anticipating if the 8th graders can't be working on the freshman team, there may not be the numbers. But we don't know that.
So, yeah, you.
No, hold on.
But
Last
we already
year,
have pointed out.
just so that I can be clear.
Sure.
Last year's freshman team was made up of all 8th graders.
Yes.
And they're freshmen this year.
And they're freshmen this year.
they're
And
not playing?
they'll most likely move up to JV.
Okay.
So did we not have enough on the JV team last year?
There was 10 or 11.
Kids on the
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's just saying it might not be a full roster, that's all. But that remains to be seen, right?
What savings would that be?
About $5,000.
So,
But what does that do to our
that
other
doesn't
sports?
matter.
Does that mean we have
he's
to,
just saying there might be some
make-
flexibility. You might not
if
need
we
to
don't
take as much
field the
money out of
girls'
choice.
team, do we have to cut a boys' team? How does that
No,
work?
because we offered it.
Okay. all right.
Yeah, there's Title IX.
Title IX,
implications.
yeah, that's what I was worried about.
If we said, oh, we're not going to offer freshman girls basketball, we'd be in a huge Title IX violation.
Okay, then
But-
you'd have to cut freshman boys.
Right, but because we're offering
You're
it.
offering it, but you can't fill it. That's a different story. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right.
So it's not, what do you think about the idea of choice?
I would be in
Need a
favor
motion
of
then?
that.
Do we need a motion?
All right, so the chair will entertain a motion to fund the current athletic deficit of roughly $12,000 after applying $33,000 from choice.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Chris.
I'm on next too, so.
Oh, you're still up, yeah. We're not gonna make any friends on this one either.
See such a turnout for
that's pretty
educational
amazing.
issues.
Yeah, everyone's sticking around for
What were
MCAS,
you
right?
gonna say? Because I didn't get to make a comment.
Is that you are worried about if the numbers fall apart, right? If we could, as a school, kind of maybe make that more concrete, that we can make sure that we have the numbers by giving it support, giving the programs kind of a advertisement almost,
Yeah.
so that we get support from the students.
Right.
And because when
Can
it
we
comes
come
down
up with
to
9 kids?
Excellent
to say-
That's a great idea.
Excellent. I mean,
Yeah.
and really let the students know how
Yes,
important it
every year I
is for the
beg God to do
viability
that.
for
Well, unless the
everybody.
captains go in
your role here, that Yeah. you can convey to the student body
If it
what
means playing
happens
their
in
sport and
these
coming up with 4
and the
players,
importance.
they'll find 4 players.
All right, let's keep moving along so we can.
Okay.
All right.
All right, here we go.
Discussion,
Yeah.
I thought
Okay.
that, excuse
We'll
me,
move as
because I have
quickly
a
as
really
we
bad
can,
cold, I
sure.
can't speak up,
All
but
right.
Thank you, Brian.
Next up is
Next up.
Excellent.
super.
Excellent. Thank you.
Actually, Chris, you know what?
Yeah,
You're
let's
up here.
let's leave Chris
So,
up here.
now let's have some more good news.
Yes, that's it. So we're not gonna make any new friends
Do you,
on this next
do you know
time.
when our first frost is going to be?
You put the recommendation in.
I'll check my farmer's almanac.
Week of October 6th is what the Farmer's Almanac
All right.
says. Okay, so we just put on, we're going to come back to the MCAS thing. We put on just an update for you on the response to the Triple E. And, I think the principals are here, and obviously they can talk a little bit more about, how the implications of how this is working. So we thought maybe we'd have Chris just give you a brief update or overview on what we've done with the sports programs, because we've had to be quite creative. And fortunately, we have nice neighbors who have been willing to help us out. There is a slight impact in cost, which obviously you're seeing. But since Georgetown is considered a critical area, the Board of Health was very adamant that, and I talked to her as recently as Monday morning, adamant that if the ban is from 3 to 9, and the reason it's 3 is because of Georgetown's critical status, and apparently as the weather gets cooler, the mosquito activity happens earlier. I didn't realize that, I learned that. And then during the day, only with protection. She's very clear on that, so I, of course, say, what does protection look like? And she says they gotta be dressed, their bodies have to be covered, and they have to be sprayed with bug spray. Now, the bottom line is it's really tough for us to manage that. We can't just randomly be spraying people's children with bug spray. We don't know whether kids were sprayed in the morning before they came. And it's been a nightmare, I'll say, and I kudos to the teachers and the aides and all of the people who have really been trying, particularly at the elementary level, to make this work. The kids need the 15 minutes of, exercise, there's no doubt about it. But as we've talked about it as an administrative team at length, and of course we all have different opinions, we aren't in agreement 100%, but what we did agree to at the end is that the recommendation we would make to the committee is that reluctantly we think the only way we can guarantee 100% that no one is going to be infected during the school day is to not have students be going outside for gym or for recess. Understanding it's a burden, it's not good for the
No one
kids,
wants it.
but I don't think any of us, and again, maybe 99.9% chances that no one would ever be affected. But I don't know that anybody in this room, and I certainly and the administrators do not want to have that on our head, that if anything ever happened, that we just didn't make the choice. The Board of Health said she'd support us either way, but she said you do need to make sure there's protection. I did research it with our attorney to talk about the liability issue, that maybe what we could do is have parents sign off saying, we let you spray our children, but then we don't really want the responsibility or liability of that either. If a child has an allergic reaction, bug spray gets, lots of things could happen. And then the other thing is, could they sign off saying, I took responsibility and I hold the district completely harmless And, you know, at the end of the day, we said, you know, 100%, the only way we can be 100% safe is to not have kids go outside.
What did they say, though, to that last option?
Our attorney said that as long as we were having people sign off, that's possible, but then, of course, if something happens, we're gonna get sued anyway.
Understand.
I mean, that's the bottom line.
So no recess until first frost.
You know, reluctantly, and
Is there any ability on the elementary level that they
Yes.
would be able to have recess maybe in the gym if it's large enough to hold them?
well, that's something that the principals have been trying to come up with creative ways. I don't know, Margaret and Donna, if you wanna, I mean, Donna has 530 students at one gym, so that's a little bit of a trick, but
That's the problem. They use all their spaces.
I have been able to free up some of the gym for about 15-minute increments, so teachers can sign up, take the kids down.
Because I agree, you know, they do need
Right.
some large motor things.
And for the
And then with sports, maybe Chris
Sports.
could talk about quickly what we've done.
Sure. So I think the first thing that's important to state is the coaches, the players, you know, everyone involved has been really helpful and supportive and has really been on the same team, which is important because a couple naysayers and the whole thing falls apart. So, you know, kudos to them for doing the right thing. So basically we've been busing our kids to Haverhill, to Riverside Park to practice. There's a fairly adequate facility. It's right behind the stadium, so we're actually able to use some of their equipment from the stadium on a day-to-day basis. All of our home games are on the road right now, so other schools have been very accommodating with that and finding fields. Masconomet especially has actually offered us fields for a home game for us where we weren't even playing Masconomet, so they actually let us use the field for that because we were in a jam.
Hey, Chris,
Yes.
excuse me for interrupting, but with Haverhill, have you checked with the website for tracking and mosquitoes and which have been found? And if I'm not mistaken, and I probably am, but Haverhill has been identified with mosquitoes in Tripoli, and
Sure.
I'm just wondering what that's about.
They set their curfew at dusk,
Yes,
as opposed to
5.
us who have set our curfew at 3:00.
Yep.
So that's the major difference. Their board of health doesn't deem it. I don't know if I say
They're not deemed. Are they deemed critical?
No.
They're not.
Amesbury is
Yeah.
now, the Amesbury is, but
Yeah.
everyone else is high, you know, even in the area. I mean, all the area schools have, I think you even had a big meeting of all the league officials to talk about
half
Tripoli
of the
because it's
schools
affecting everyone.
have nighttime restrictions. About half of them don't. So Masconomet, believe it or not, doesn't. Hamilton Wenham doesn't. So there's different risk levels in different towns, and
Woods and horses.
So,
Well, thank you to all of our neighbors then that have been so
yeah.
accommodating.
And I mean, you know, we do.
coaches and teachers and everyone have been phenomenal.
But bear in mind, it all comes at a cost. We're up to
Absolutely.
about 5,000 right now for transportation.
Comes out of the snow budget.
Yeah, our robust snow budget.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate
Chris,
it.
thank you for all your
Thanks,
help.
Chris. You're
Thank
doing
you
a
for
great
putting
job.
in all the time and
Poor
extra
Chris's first year as
work
athletic
and-
director. He's had all kinds of things to deal with.
Doing a good job.
Welcome.
It's new and interesting every day.
Yes.
All right, moving right along. Superintendent's
Yeah,
report.
so,
MCAS district overview.
yes. So we have some.
Oh, Julie, hi, welcome.
So we have some new things to report to you. So, Julie and I are just gonna kind of fly through this PowerPoint. We don't expect this to be the only presentation you're going to be receiving on this. There are a lot of new things this year that we are gonna be talking to you about. We're gonna be coming back and talking not only about this, but we're gonna be talking about the new teacher and administrator evaluation process, because you have a role in that. So there'll be a number of these kind of informational kind of sessions. So we're gonna go through this report, everything very quickly, and there's some very brief data summaries that we're gonna go over. I think some very encouraging news, ways to look at some data, and then obviously some areas that we're gonna be able to focus on. But what I wanna say before we start though is, you know, it's a bit of history, because now I'm happy because I'm here 6 years now. So I have history. I can talk about it. Donna has history, Peter has history, and the others are learning quickly. But
Some slow.
but when I first came here, one of the very first things that people were very, very angry about was the fact that at Pembroke School, there were 75% of the kids in 4th and 5th grade that were in the bottom 2 categories. And how could that be happening in Georgetown? And frankly, that was one of the questions I asked when I came here. How can that be happening in Georgetown, where all of the conditions for learning tend to be positive? You don't have ethnic racial tensions. low income, ELL. I mean, those things don't exist. So how could that happen? Two-family homes, some affluence. How could that happen? And, you know, we found out there were a lot of reasons for it. But when we were trying to attack the problem, it was like we were attacking it from multiple angles because there were so many things that needed to be attacked at once. Now, the good news is now we're not talking about 75% of the kids in the bottom two categories. Now we're talking about taking the majority of kids being proficient in advanced and now taking those proficient kids and moving them to the advanced. The biggest problem we had was the needs improvement category was way, way, way too high. And the things that we've been doing over 6 years, the work we've been doing with curriculum, the teachers' professional development, the efforts the teachers have been putting together, the coordination between the elementary schools, all of those things are having a definite difference. And so now when you start looking at the data we're looking at, we can now we're at the point where we can go in more closely with a laser because now the areas that we have as weaknesses are definite weaknesses. And the other things that we're doing show that the progress we're making is moving children in the right direction. And we're getting much more positive reactions. And that's the goal of MCAS. Lever for improvement. You take it, you use the information, and as kids go through to the 10th grade, and they take the test, and 100% of the students graduate with an MCAS diploma, that tells you that, you know, that when we follow the cohort groups, the kids who start in 3rd grade and take the test every year, by the time you get to 10th grade, you're seeing 25 to 35% percentage points improvements over time, because the longer they're here, the more they get the standards-based education, the more their performance improves. That's the right way to go. So when we're going to talk to you a little bit here, you're going to see we're not only going to identify some of the strengths, but we're also going to identify a few areas that we know are going to require more strategic action planning. And we're happy about that because it seems like it's manageable, as opposed to where we have to target all kinds of things at one time. So kudos to all the teachers and the staff and the principals and people who have been willing to sort of follow the plan and work hard to really be changing the landscape for student achievement, particularly at the elementary and middle levels. Okay, so with that, let's go, Julie.
All right. I will not read this giant slide to you. However, what I wanted to do is just give you some really key pieces of information that would hopefully shed some light on why we even have the changes that we have in the way that data is reported by the state. So this presentation is to provide you with information about the changes that have resulted in our state's accountability waiver that we have adjusted for since February of 2012. And the number of changes that we have in terms of how we label specific schools. In the past, we would label schools as identified for improvement or corrective action or restructuring with the previous reporting categories from the Department of Ed. But now, with the new accountability system, our 100% proficiency expectation by 2014 has been changed with the goal of narrowing proficiency gaps by half by 2016-2017. And then I'll talk to you a little about AYP to PPI, what those acronyms really mean, and some of the number crunching that goes along with that. So all in all, districts are assigned, I'll just go back really quickly, levels. I'm sure you've heard of other districts that are in leveled status, and that was a typically negative connotation if you were a level 3 or a level 4 or a level 5 district. That whole system has changed to accommodate for levels 1 through 5, and that's how every district is now identified across the state.
Julie, what did Massachusetts get when they applied for this waiver? Did Mass get anything for that?
What do you mean, got?
Did they receive anything in return if you applied for this waiver from the federal government? Was there anything?
We had to make a number of changes in terms of how we would assess students and how we would accommodate our proficiency gaps. So we had to change the way that we looked at students who had our neediest populations. So we had to really look at how we would adjust to those numbers, and actually, even though we're not at the goal of 100% proficiency for the state of Massachusetts, what it's done is really identified for us the very specific and targeted places where we have to support our students better. So I'm going to get into that a little bit, but we'll definitely do that over time. That's fine. No, that's fine. Okay, so when you look at the data later on, you'll see that each school has a percentile between numbers 1 through 99, and those indicators identify for us typically where our schools fall in a range of 1 to 100. And also, it will identify for us where our students fall in the aggregate, which is all students, in the high needs subgroup, which is the other reporting category. So every single district in the state of Massachusetts is going to have data reported on these two populations, the aggregate, all students, and the subgroups that are part of the high needs subgroup. And those subgroups are the low income students, students with disabilities, English language learners, and our students that were former English language learners who we track over a number of years, their progress. This is the scary slide, so let me just give you the upshot here. The PPI is a transition from AYP, which was adequate yearly progress, to our performance indicators. So our expectation here in Massachusetts is that we will narrow our proficiency gaps. We will start to monitor really closely our student growth percentiles, and that's also factored into the new PPI ratio. And we will also identify schools between the 5 to 7 indicators. And so what I kind of typed up for you here was that our annual PPI indicates progress from one year to the next, and it incorporates at the elementary level 5 indicators, so narrowing proficiency gaps in our ELA tests, our mathematics tests, our science tests, and then the student growth within those tests for ELA and for mathematics. Cumulative PPI is a little different because it represents a trend over time. And right now we have 4 years worth of data that the state is using to identify our trends over time. And so that cumulative PPI is typically expected to be at a range of 75 or higher. And that's the targeted goal for all schools in the state. Okay, but obviously we'll get into this a little bit more. There are other indicators that are part of PPI. At the high school level, it's not just the 5 that I referenced before, but it also incorporates the dropout ratio and the cohort graduation ratio. So that's a little bit different for the 10th grade data. And so what I have here is just a really quick rundown of how PPI targets are reported. It's on a 100-point scale. So on the range of 0 to 100, if your score is if your school or your district is in the 75 range, that means you're on target, which is not a number that we would necessarily, in our minds, associate with being on target. 75 seems to be something you're still striving, and I think that's still how we look at that as well. If your school is falling in a 50 range, that means you've improved, but it's below the state's target for your school. If you're ranging in the 25, that means there's no change over time. And if you're scoring somewhere in your subgroups or in your aggregate at the 0, that means your numbers have declined over time. So it's an interesting brand new calculation that every school district is currently working through and trying to identify, how do we wrap our minds around this, and how do we make this make sense to other people. But what they did come out and say in some of the DESE webinars that we've attended was that 80% of schools across the state of Massachusetts are classified in levels 1 or 2. And so it's a pretty high ratio for school districts to be in those 2 categories, 1 or 2. So how are schools classified? I'm going to push ahead into this one because I wanted to actually consolidate these 2 slides so you could get a visual with what I'm about to tell you, and I'll try to be quick. Like I said before, there are 5 levels now that the state reports out data on. So if you're a level 1 school system, that means you're meeting proficiency and closing the gaps in terms of your student achievement for the aggregate and the high needs students. So the ESE engagement on the right is very low. If you're a level 2, that means you're not meeting proficiency and gap narrowing goals in the aggregate or high needs in a specific area. And I will talk to you a little bit more about that. The ESE engagement is relatively very low, again, for level 2, based on some of the information Carol and I have been looking at from the state. If you're a level 3 district, your schools are performing the lowest 20% of the state's schools. And so that would also include a number of your students falling in the lowest performing subgroups. And so the ESE engagement shifts into high gear where they are working more, you're working more with the Department of Ed staff. Level 4, same situation, very high ESE engagement. And you have a subset of schools that are level 3 that are continuously low performing, and level 5 chronically underperforming. There's only one district in the state right now that's currently at a level 5 school system. So this is how they've changed everything in terms of the way the state looks at data. You probably remember these graphs. I put this in here, but I didn't put it in your PowerPoint because I just wanted to show you a little bit of how we used to look at information. Do you remember this one? We went through that last year. We broke down CPI, and but what we took this year was our 2012 data, and we put it into this old frame so that you could get a visual here on where our students are scoring, and I have copies for you so I can give you hard copies of this as well. But if you look on the left-hand side, what you'll see is that our proficient or higher scores are very consistently high and much higher than the state's score. So we do very well, and we're very proud of that. And so if you could go through and combine all the numbers, but if you look to the right-hand side, what you'll see way to the right, the first time we've been able to really get some good numbers here is to look at how many students are included in each grade level, testing in each range, and the student growth percentile that's associated with the growth that these students are achieving at each grade level across these tests and over time.
And you're looking for a range of?
We're looking for a range of 40 to 60 in terms of student growth percentile. We feel that that's a really...
The old system didn't provide any accommodation for student growth.
Right.
For the student growth.
So this gives us another way of looking at data. Okay. So
You
this...
can have students who fail MCAS, but who make 85% growth. So you say, wow,
Yep.
so you keep working with that student, but, you can't really ask a whole lot more than that.
Right. So what we used to have was what I had just shown you in that previous slide, and this is the way the new data reports are coming out from the Department of Ed. So we received a district accountability data sheet, and what that did was they took all of those numbers that you saw in the previous slide and they translated it into this new reporting mechanism. So you'll see some information here on all of our students. This is a district as a whole. So we found 74. Do you remember when I said earlier that 75 is considered to be on target? So as a district, we're looking at that number to figure out where is that one, where are we off in that one where we're not consistently on target across the board, grades 3 through 10. And so what we're trying to do is break down that data right now in each school and in each grade level to try to determine those things. But you will see other places where we did meet our targets. And because of where we are, when I take I'm just going to show you really quickly how we break out our data by school. Our Pembroke accountability data is broken into a similar frame, and you'll see all students met the targets. And so when we look a little bit deeper into our high needs subgroups or our high needs category, that new reporting category, you'll see that we fell in that 60 range. So we have to break that down a little deeper into some of the categories that fall below that and take a look at our populations and figure out exactly where we need to target our interventions.
Julie, what's the difference between high needs and students with disabilities?
Students with disabilities is part of the high needs category. That all students in the high needs are the top 2 layers, and underneath high needs, all of those categories of students fall into that high needs.
Okay.
Does that make
So
sense?
they're counted twice. But if you look at that, what you might
You
think is
aggregate, all high needs are included in all students.
That's right.
And then
That's
students
right.
with disabilities are included in high needs.
High needs.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
So if you look at the high needs comes over, but look at the population of the subgroup of white, that helps you, but the special ed subgroup is lower, so.
Yeah.
it-
Okay.
So if we look at a target there, obviously what's pretty obvious is that we need to take a look at,
Right.
the special
Okay.
education programs and the services and.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so this is our middle high school data. So this data spans from grades 6 through 10. And you'll see again our high needs, all students met the target. And our high needs subgroups, and then after you break down those different subsets or subgroups beneath that, you'll see where we met targets within the high needs range, but where we did not meet targets. And so again, we'll be taking a look at disaggregating that data.
And remember, to be in level 1, you have to be 75 or better in both
In
the
both.
aggregate, which obviously we are here, and the high needs, which we're not.
Yep.
Right.
Okay.
Does anyone have any questions before I move on? Okay. So our high points. At the same time that this data, the data comes out from the Department of Ed and everybody is scrambling. We're trying to get into data warehouse. It's just, everybody's in. And at the same time, other media venues are compiling this data as well. So you'll see some reports in the Boston Globe, and you'll see some reports on Boston.com, and then they'll start to go school by school. So I pulled this out of Boston.com. This is a school by school results sheet. And when we went through and we took a look at the number of our students in terms of how they range or how they are compared in scores school by school, we found some really positive data. And so we wanted to share that with you. And what we found, Carol and I went down and crunched some numbers. There are 4 areas where we rank in the top 25% of the state, which is fantastic. And those 4 areas are 10th grade science, our 8th grade English, 5th grade math, and 3rd grade math. And so those 4 categories, we are just amazing. And
What areas they do well in?
With the
in
top
the top
25%.
25% of the state.
Which were those again? Is there a copy I can look at the end of this?
Sure.
Oh, sure.
Of
We
course,
can do
yeah.
that.
10th grade science, 8th grade English, 5th grade math, and 3rd grade math. Yes. And then when we looked again at this data, what we found was that we were also in the top top third of the state for every other MCAS test that our students took at each grade level.
Except
Except
the 3 that.
Except the 3, right.
What does really high points mean?
Well, that's just a title of our slide.
That's just my title of how our data is being reported across the state. So we look at our own data from our Department of Ed, the way that our Department of Ed gives us our data as a district. But when we look at our data across the state, and
compared to other schools.
Other schools in the same grade range.
So what we're doing is we're talking about
Bruce, we can answer questions after this, okay?
Sure. Right.
Yeah, so the 3 areas we had were 5th grade science that we have to look at.
Yep. Yes.
6th grade math and 8th grade math.
What about 8th grade science?
Let's see.
Yes,
Eighth grade science. Oops, sorry, 8th grade.
Oh,
yeah, I got that start.
8th grade science. I see 8th grade
Wait,
science.
8th grade math is not. Oh, yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
7th grade math. 40% needs improvement. Warning / failing.
Well, we fell into we were comparing it into the percentage of the state, so.
Right, but I'm
we
just
were
more-
looking at that was 33%.
Yeah. Well,
Well,
and
it's an area, there's no doubt, we're looking at the whole math
Believe
program
me,
at the middle school.
we are.
5th grade science is
And the
difficult
sci-
without any labs for the
That-
kids. I mean,
And 5th grade science is an entry point in
Yeah.
the science MCAS world.
Right.
So
It's
5th
a new
grade is
test
our
for the
They don't have
first.
any access to lab science
Right.
curriculum,
Correct.
so
Yeah,
and
and we
it's
add it.
tested
That's
for
right. Yep.
in the
Just,
MCAS.
and this is, just so I'm clear, this, when you say 6th grade English, those were all the children that were in 6th grade last year. So it's this year's
7th grade.
7th
This is
grade.
our current 7th grade.
Say that again?
This year's 7th grade.
When you look at like 6th grade English,
Yeah.
they are this year's 7th graders.
Right, right.
I just want to make sure I had it in perspective.
Yes.
The other thing we found was when we looked at our trends over time, and we were able to disaggregate the data. I mean, you'll see the charts, all the charts that we show and all of those things. I mean, that's not obviously what we have here, because it is a different reporting mechanism. But when we went through and we looked at the data and we were able to compile our scores for our 10th grade ELA test, for example, 95% of our students, all students, scored in the proficient and advanced categories for the ELA MCAS test. And so there are things like that you don't see until you disaggregate this data. And so what we chose to do tonight was not to go through, I mean, as excited as we are about all of these things, we didn't go through and disaggregate every little point because we wanted to show you how everything has changed in the reporting world and just give you an overview of this data as it's coming out with this new reporting tool. And then really be able to break down for you and give you some information on where we're really seeing some gains and some strengths and where we know we need to shore things up and reassess how we're addressing those things. And so that brings me to my last slide, which is our next steps. How do we take all of this data and now make some recommendations for change, or or look at things and make some decisions in terms of how we will move forward when it comes to specific content areas. So what we're doing right now in each school is just aggregating data and assessing our students' scores for trends in ELA, math, and science. We're identifying our growth through the data trends, but we're also establishing school-based action plans, which is something that we have to do anyway as a school district, but we may have to go back and make some adjustments to our school improvement plans as a result of this data, because that is a requirement of being a level 2 school district. But we also want to do that because we need to determine where our goals are going to be for this school year. It's early enough in the year. It's only the last week of September, so we should be able to make some significant decisions in terms of how we will raise our students' achievement and lower these proficiency gaps in the different contents and in the different subgroups that we're identifying here. So that is the plan for us in terms of what we will be doing in the next few weeks to really take a look at that. I'll look at that, Carol will look at that, our special ed director will look at that, our principals, our department heads, our teachers, and really start to break down these numbers and figure out what that means for us moving forward.
Great.
Great.
Thank
So
you,
when do we do our next MCAS? Is that where we
Administer it or talk about our
no
results?
go through our results? Is it
We
December?
have done that in
November,
November-ish,
December. Okay.
But let's talk about that.
All right, yeah, we'll have to-
because,
let's-
because we probably, because we're level 2, we probably do need to
Yeah,
do those adjustments to the improvement plans if we're gonna do that a little sooner. Because,
Yeah.
they'll have to look at their current goals and make sure that the goals are consistent with the data, and some may need to change each week to be added, et
Okay.
cetera.
When will we get these from our own children?
They came in
Oh,
the mail today.
I was gonna say they've
Yeah.
been mailed out.
Today.
So you should've-
Our MTS data was released last week by the state, and we had to wait for those
it was-
the results to come. So
Yeah, it
you
was-
should be getting them in the next day.
When
or
did
two
we
if you
mail them
haven't
out,
received them
everybody?
already.
Today in email.
They did today?
Yes.
Oh, good.
So we mailed them out on Friday, or that's last week?
They're all out.
I know, they got them, but we did it last week?
Yesterday afternoon.
They came in the mail, or they came with the backpack?
No, mail.
Mail today.
Oh, wow.
Or mine arrived today.
If they left yesterday and got there
US
today?
Postal Service. They're all-
Wow, I'm pretty impressed,
Very
that's a good
efficient.
turnaround time.
Okay.
We'll mail them tomorrow when they get
All right, moving.
Great.
Then I think.
I think we're good,
We're
unless
good.
you have questions, and we will keep you posted.
Yeah, let's just make sure we have our next meeting scheduled so we can go through all the
We will.
detailed information.
Sure.
How does the one student that doesn't fall into trends and whatnot, how does that student get picked up if they're struggling?
You mean if a student doesn't fall into a
Well,
subgroup?
Well, the principals,
Is that what you mean?
the principals look individual by individual.
Yeah.
I mean,
And-
MCAS is really, to me, a student-by-student thing. I know the state reports it as a subgroup, we have 30 more kids in this particular place, but every student counts, and so it's really taking a look at, how is a student doing over time, and we can do that now much more so with the student growth percentile and take a look at, how the student is progressing than we ever could have before. So that's a great thing. It's a great, transition with this data, but it is definitely a personal thing.
I think I just need to be reminded of that, because I look at this and I look at this and
I know, and it all comes at you, and you're trying to break it all down, and so that's.
There are some kind of individual student plans for students that fall into the needs improvement category. If I recall, I'm a little bit.
Student
It's
success
actually for
plans?
warning. They have student success
Success
plans.
plans, yeah.
For students in warning. Because needs improvement is
Okay.
not failing.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but certainly we still look at individual
But absolutely.
students, and we're able to disaggregate the data significantly so that you can break it down and determine exactly where a student's individual strengths and weaknesses are based on questions and strands and
Yeah, you can look
No,
at
right down to
parents can do that with the
patterns,
reports
relations,
that we
analysis.
receive in the mail.
Correct.
The
Yeah.
parent reports have gotten
I was gonna say,
better.
the parent report's amazing. You can tell exactly
It is.
what
I mean,
they.
we take a really close look at not only this data, but I love to look at the, and I always tell I always tell the principal this, I love to look at the item analysis, because when I look at the item analysis, I get a sense, I can read the question, I can think about, what types of answers could have been used, and so you really get a better sense of the test when you can see the test and use an item analysis to break it down, in addition to some of this overarching information. That helps us with curriculum and alignment and, maybe gaps that we have, or places where we make sure that we want to include more writing, for instance, or things like that. And so it's a great tool for us to use as well.
This, Julie, the classifying schools, so we're currently level 2.
Yes.
But to be a level 1 school doesn't mean that all of your students are
At 100%.
scoring high. It just means that they're they're improving at a certain level, is that right?
Yes, because the number you get is a combination of the way they performed, but also the student growth factor. So
Okay, yeah,
this is the
that's
first time
just
they
like-
actually give credit for growth.
They're giving you credit for that's fabulous. That's just that's like.
I know.
That's
It's nice
awesome.
to see after 10 years, I
Yes,
think, this type of
that's-
shift.
Going to change the
It's like somebody heard somebody say something.
Somewhere.
We can't make all the kids get advanced.
Well, I think that's the purpose of the waiver, because what Massachusetts was finding is, based on the trajectory of where they were, even though we were at, our CPI was like 92, but it wasn't significant enough growth. We didn't hit the growth target, so we got put into a needs improvement status. And you say, what? 92%, or 92
Right.
score. How
Right.
are we needs improvement? But because of the way it was structured, so that's why they said, we don't think this is really representing what we really want to say. So now what they're saying is, if you're starting here over a 6-year period, you have to increase that by half. Not to 100, but you have to. So we actually have information that we didn't share with you that literally tells us what those targets are in each of those subgroups. So we know what we're trying to hit.
That's awesome.
So
That's
I think
really
it
nice.
actually is a more fair system, to be honest with you.
More
I
helpful,
think.
I would think, too,
Yeah.
for the schools.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much for
Julie.
explaining
Yes,
all the
thanks, Julie.
changes and new
Carol, can I just
newness
point to Morgan?
Yes,
to
you
the
can.
process. That's helpful.
Yes, you can call
I
us.
can get most of the, I understand most of it.
Yeah, we'll help you, Bruce.
Yeah, just so I don't make any stupid mistakes.
No, we'll help you.
Good, thanks.
All right.
I don't want you guys like,
Any questions about the superintendent's information for the committee?
what time will you be in?
You call Bruce, I'll help you.
Just one thing on the enrollment, Carol.
Yes.
High school enrollment's been going down since '09. Went from 455 down to 408 this year.
Yes.
No, and so we're down to 1563 overall in the district.
Right, but remember, we did cut a K and a cut a 1 class a couple of years ago, so the enrollment was lower at those levels. We knew that trend was happening.
Okay.
At the high school, I think this year there were a number of kids who left between the 8th and 9th grade, so that accounts for some of it. Do you have any
That's
other?
higher. Usually we average 7-8%. We've had about 17% this year.
Okay.
So that would be somewhat of a factor. Can you think of anything else? Peter, the other thing is the choice, we've been decreasing the number of choice students
Yeah,
every year
that's-
by a pretty significant number.
That's about 10 kids a year.
Okay.
So we've done that for 3 years now,
At least 3 years.
so that's at least 30 kids.
Okay. So I'm just wondering how that's going to factor into the whole overcrowding issue with NEASC. I wonder if that is going to help us out.
Oh, I would think it would help us
At
out.
all. It'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Well, NEAS never said anything about class sizes. They talked about floating teachers.
Oh, okay. So it was more of a real space issue than
It
class
was
size.
space,
Okay.
They weren't happy with some of the high numbers of kids in the 30s
In
either.
the science classes.
Yeah.
But we rectified that
You did,
in
right away.
2007.
Okay. All right. All right. Moving right along to line item transfers. And this is encumbering. Is this encumbering all the?
Everything, all the salaries.
Oh, the salaries, okay.
Encumbered, and so, a lot of this probably would have been done if I think you typically recast your budget, and
Right.
it wasn't done.
Okay.
So I literally had to move every salary line around.
Okay.
To try to get it balanced, because there was money in salary adjustments and the raises and all that, so this was trying to get all this.
Get
This is
everything.
only salaries, I'll come back next time with some operations.
With
but-
operational, okay.
Right.
So does everyone understand what that all means? Okay. So the chair will entertain a motion to approve line item transfers 1 through 82 as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, audit report findings for the end of the year. Any questions on that?
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Just, I can give a little
Yeah, I was gonna say if you-
background. This is an audit, it's not necessarily a financial audit, it's an audit of our end-of-the-year report to the Department of Education. So we are required every September to file all our financial statements and where we spent our money into a form developed by the Department of Education. It used to be like 32 schedules, and now it's maybe 5. And they use that to look at a lot of different things, but they also use it to see your net school spending numbers. So it pulls in numbers from the town, indirect cost numbers. So most of the findings on this, and I think if you had the chance to read the minutes from the Budget and Finance meeting, Bobby took great notes about what we talked about that day about these findings. Most of them are correctable very easily. If you look, something was reported on the wrong line, belonged here, didn't belong there, or whatever, most of them. There was a finding that we don't have a signed agreement with the town,
Right.
which is something I'm working on. I think that the Department of Education agrees with the methodology we use to report it, but by law, you're supposed to have a signed agreement between the Board of Selectmen and the school committee.
And this has been an issue for several years now.
Since it went into effect.
Right.
But you're not alone.
Right.
There's many districts that are, that the Department of Education says you're doing it right, but the law says you're supposed to have a signed
need an
agreement.
agreement, right.
So I have some samples, and that's on my agenda to try to get that
It's interesting though how
resolved.
they don't enforce it.
Right, they
It's a
don't do
law, but
anything
they
to
don't
you,
enforce
right.
it.
They just
They just
report
find-
it on,
report it
yeah,
on
yeah.
them.
Right.
And hope that you'll get sick of seeing it. Right?
Well, we're there.
Yeah, I mean, it's, yeah.
So, but as I said, so I'm in the process of doing the end of the year report for fiscal year 12. So I have taken the last couple of years' audit reports, and as I'm reporting, I'm making sure that I'm, trying to make sure I don't make the same mistakes. Because, I've worked in a couple of different districts. There's a lot of revolving accounts here, and the fee-based and donations and stuff that I'm not so familiar with. So, but there wasn't any findings in the audit, so I'm following just what Jim did last year for those reports. So hopefully we'll come back with, a couple of findings. And typically, what you do, and what didn't happen this year, is they do a draft audit in February and March, and they say that you need to, that's incorrectly reported. So the Department of Education allows you up until June to make amendments to your end-of-the-year report and fix all those errors. That didn't happen this year, because in the transition, the last date to file the amendments was June 30th. I didn't start till July. So Jim did
left
some.
around the 14th, so.
Yeah, Jim did some amendments. I found some amendments in his book, he did, but he didn't do them all. So typically, you'll have findings, you amend it, findings gone. So hopefully, next spring when we get this, we won't have pages of
There was
findings.
really nothing in here, as I
No,
talked
there was
to
nothing-
Joan,
it was the usual.
It was nothing in there where it was like, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
they're tweaks, and we
Yeah.
are already adjusting for those.
Any questions on the monthly financial report? I just had a couple.
Sure.
The deficit spending that we have, there's a few.
Where? What did you
I was
see
just
in-
flipping through and I found a couple. Let's see, pupil transportation.
Oh, I should explain that. I asked Carol if it was all right with her, and I believe she maybe talked to some of you, or I'm not sure. There's no reason to have the special ed tuition out lines and the special ed transportation cost broken out in the schools. It's really,
We talked
is a
about
district,
consolidating them.
it's a district line. I have other ways of breaking it out for my end of the year report, but that's really the only time you would need the information. But if the committee wanted to know, gee, how many kids at the high school are out, tuitioned out, how many kids in the middle, whatever, we have that information in a different format.
But
we
you
could give
see, this is the deficit spending, then it's just a reflection of.
Right, so next month,
Oh,
next time when I come back, you'll see I'm gonna ask for transfers to put money, all the monies from the schools in those sped lines, sped
Okay.
tuition out and sped transportation, into the district line. And in my opinion, it's much clearer to see what you're really spending in special ed if you're looking at one number,
I agree,
than broken up into all the different schools.
because we can get all that.
And can you
Sure.
educate me, and where in that report did you see deficit spending? on
Page
the-
Anything with a negative sign.
Anything with a negative is how?
Yeah, first page.
Especially
The second page. Got it.
Right, you had said that you weren't gonna break it, you were gonna just have one.
Right,
which is-
so there's a lot of deficit spending in the salaries because I haven't made the transfers yet.
Right,
But
got
the
that.
operations is
Yeah.
some of that.
Yeah, so I look at special ed transportation.
Right.
And we're not over in that. It's just the way, we haven't done the we haven't overspent that line.
No, that, we asked Margaret, the sped secretary, to start encumbering to the new line that we created.
okay,
So we need to go and we need to, move the budgets, and then we'll need to go and unencumber those POs that were encumbered to the wrong line, and then re-encumber.
Re-encumber to the correct line.
Right.
It's a little
so-
transition process.
Yep.
So I was gonna say, if you look at, probably if you just look at Pearlie, let me just find it. Oh, Pearlie's not a good one, because it's, I don't know what's going on with Pearlie, because it's way over, but let's look at another line.
What page are you on?
So if you go to page 16, right at the bottom of the page, Pembroke, special ed transportation. Well, we have the total budget available. The bottom of page 16. 33,791 is available. Well,
Yep.
that's not true.
And the special ed tuition to private
Right,
schools
not-
is also 100% available, but
Right,
that's
so-
not accurate.
right, so
Right,
next-
so that's, okay, perfect. I
So
just
next
wanted-
time when I come back, I'll have transfers in to fix all those lines, so
Okay.
that at the end of the day, hopefully there won't be any negatives.
Right, okay, but I just wanted to make sure that's what was going on.
Yes.
Okay.
Good question.
Any more?
Joan's aware of our policy.
Yeah, I
In
was
fact,
just gonna
in
say,
fact,
it's, yeah.
She'd like us to be willing to discuss that, at some other point too, making some modifications for some lines, but
Old
right
habits
now,
die
we're
hard.
working within we're working with the policy.
Okay, all right, subcommittee reports, budget and finance.
We met on Monday.
We did.
Before the selectmen's, meeting
Oh,
that you
right.
attended.
Yep.
Just to discuss the money that we were, asking to be put on the warrant.
Okay.
And that was pretty much the entire meeting.
It was long.
And you did a good job at the town meeting. I thought it went really well. I don't think there was any
No.
major,
No, knock on
concerns
wood, it
and
gets-
questions.
And I did follow up with David Surface the following day, because we didn't stay for the full discussion for their vote, and he said that it was a unanimous vote to put it on the warrant. So
It was
it's all
interesting,
set.
though, they said that they didn't need a dollar figure.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Like you said,
Yeah,
but they're
I
like, oh,
thought-
that's okay, we can, and I'm like, well, we worked so hard to
They were
get
willing
that
to
dollar
use it as a
figure.
placeholder.
Yeah, which was great.
Yeah,
That
no,
was-
which
that
was nice that they were willing to do that.
Yep.
I think Mike, yeah.
Okay, governance. Barbie?
Governance.
Oh, we have a new policy to read. Oh, but
But
I'll
this
let
is
you-
distribution.
distribution says no. Okay.
But you know what, it
Yes.
occurs to me that I should probably include in your next packet the actual, letter from ethics.
Okay, yeah,
So
why
you
don't we
have
do
the
that?
context
Yep.
of that.
Okay. All right, negotiating.
Nothing to report.
Nothing going on with that. Public relations. Pam, Rob?
But we probably need
We
to
have not
start
had a
thinking about
meeting
the negotiations.
since the last school committee meeting.
Okay.
So we do have one scheduled for October 5th,
All right.
9:00.
All right. New business. We just have the new policy distribution. So we do when you do a new policy, unlike a revision to an existing policy, you do a distribution, then you do a first read, second read, and acceptance.
Usually the second read you adopt.
Second read, we adopt.
Okay. Did you want to talk about the safety committee, or?
Yes, it was not listed. Pam.
Yeah, we had a safety committee meeting with the police department and the fire department and the school principals and the bus company. And it was a very good conversation, and we established the goal of excellent communication between all the departments, and that we would be having a monthly meeting going forward to see how everything's going.
Oh, good. Like we've had before. Like
Yep.
usually it's a monthly meeting, right?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
But you changed it, it's
Yes.
to the second
I had to do the second, yeah. the
Tuesday or
second
Thursday? Thursday.
Second Thursday.
Right.
Uh-huh.
That's always a great meeting because it's always the same time and it's always an hour.
That's right, I keep it to an
Right,
hour.
everybody needs to, they have their hours set and.
Yeah, I agree, all works well.
Any problems with the start of school or any issues around safety in the buildings or things like that?
No. We discussed some of the new buses. They
Okay.
have cameras with audios in them, which is going to be really helpful in case there's any kind of incident in which
Okay.
one person says one thing and another person says another thing. And
You can
and the
pull-
bus drivers will be telling the students, they do tell the students that, these cameras and audios are on so that everybody's aware of that.
Excellent.
The other, since we just did
Yeah.
one other.
Building committee?
committee.
Yeah, I had written that down. Building committee.
We met again, and basically we're resolving this fact sheet, which is to, I believe, they were trying to get it into the paper to submit it.
For today.
So literally, I think there are 14 facts that are on this list that the committee's gone through and debated and worked out, and everybody's in agreement, and it should be in the paper. And that's what that meeting was.
A couple of things while we're on that topic. So there was an emergency conference call today that I had to get on at 3:00 with the MSBA, because remember, we've been waiting for word
Mhm.
as to whether or not they're going to agree to partner with us on the middle high school renovation project, including the feasibility study. And while we're waiting for the actual document to confirm that, they are going to be partnering. They're tying the two projects together, and they are working with us for reimbursement.
Well, that's great.
So
Same reimbursement rate?
I'm not sure. They're working that out, but I think so. So that was actually very good news. I think we were all very happy to hear that. But now, of course, the devil's always in the details. The other important date to know about with the school building committee is that on October 3rd is the MSBA board meeting where they will vote on whether or not they're going to approve our preferred option for Pembroke. And they're also, that is where the staff is going to recommend to the board that the other project be tied to it. So.
So when you say tied to it, what does that mean?
Well, I'm still waiting to learn more information on that, but what it means is that they are expecting, like, for example, that for the town to put on the warrant of feasibility study for the middle high school and to fund it.
You can't have one without the other.
That would be necessary, as I understand
So
it.
the way in the fall, we would have a warrant, or at the fall town meeting.
29th,
We're gonna have a warrant article that says, will the town appropriate X dollars to
$85,000
to do
for
the
a-
feasibility study?
to do the feasibility study for the middle high school.
Next warrant is gonna be, or article is gonna be, will the town appropriate X million dollars to build a new Pembroke school?
Yep,
Yep.
that's correct.
Okay, so those are two separate articles.
One
That's right.
One
pass over.
one passes, the second one doesn't.
Right, does it
Right.
still go through?
It's a problem if the second one does not pass, based on what I heard today.
They're tied together.
Okay, so they both have to pass to make it.
But the good
And
news.
at the polls, they both have to pass.
I don't think the
Oh.
article about the feasibility study even goes to the polls. It's just the debt exclusion, I believe, that goes to the
That is
polls.
correct.
Okay.
So I think it makes it a little bit more palatable perhaps to the town to look at that if it's going to be supported 50% around by the MSBA. Because I know that's a question on many people's minds.
project-
And
If
the
if
feasibility
MSB
study and the project would be?
No, just all that's gonna be on is to do the feasibility study.
But would
Okay.
would the next step be if the feasibility comes out with whatever renovation we need to, or any improvements we need to make, would they be willing to share at that point?
That's right.
They would
That's what I believe they said today.
Okay.
Is that you would do the feasibility study, if you got funding, you would do the feasibility study in the winter and the spring, basically.
Okay.
Come back to the spring town meeting
Yeah,
perhaps.
timing I'm not worried about, I was just
Yeah.
more worried about if they, what
But they would,
share.
but my understanding is they're sharing in the
Okay.
process. And I did have to pop off for a couple of minutes to deal with another situation, but when I popped back on, that's what I heard.
Okay.
So I'm just giving the committee the news that, there is definitely, that I can tell you without any doubt that the condition of passing the feasibility study at town meeting is a condition. And what they said was that they will agree that they're coming in on that project with us as partners.
Okay.
Okay, so that's, and then the third date, second date, October 20th, there's going to be it's a Saturday. There's going to be a community meeting, a question and answer, open discussion. I think their plan is to hopefully invite all the boards in town that would be interested in this, but also open it up to the public. So if you have nothing that you're doing on Saturday, October 20th at 10 o'clock I think that one is at the middle high school.
Do they know that there's also a PSAT test being administered?
They probably don't know that.
We did.
They probably don't know that.
We
I bet they
didn't.
do.
Well, maybe people who drop their children off can come to the question and answer. I don't know.
Where do they take the exam?
I don't know. My son
you
will
know,
be taking it for the
Paul?
first time.
They just, they take it in the school, in the classrooms.
In the class.
Oh, in the
Typically they
classroom.
do.
Okay, great,
Be the
great.
English wing.
And the English wing. There we go.
Thank you.
So anyway, and I think there's also a community meeting. I think it's the 15th. I'm not positive, but I think it's the 15th. I'll clarify that. I'll send you an email on that, where they're going to do another one in the evening. This one is a Saturday, thinking they may get a different audience.
They should have it at the soccer fields.
Yeah, on Saturday. Right. Well, there you go. Okay, thank you.
All right, so let's see, distribution of the new policy for relations with nonprofit entities. We'll go through, you have a copy, Carol's gonna give us more information at the next meeting.
That's right.
And we'll have this first reading of it. Next up is the acceptance of an athletic donation, which was made by Mr., what is it? It's not anonymous. Yeah, I just want to make sure it wasn't anonymous. Which was made by Mr. and Mrs. Harry Takis, in honor of Patrick Thompson, and it's made to the athletic department.
That's right.
So the chair will entertain a motion to accept the $100 donation from Mr. and Mrs. Takis with gratitude as presented.
So moved. Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And once
Very
again, we are
grateful.
supremely grateful for all that,
Absolutely.
all the donations
All the
that everyone
donations.
makes
Very
to
helpful.
us, and especially something like this. It does go a long way. There was information given to you by the superintendent, and we, at this time, are not going to be discussing it. We may discuss it at the next meeting, so please hold on to it. And we don't need to go into executive session this evening.
Are we gonna go back to Cole since we didn't?
Oh,
we
yes,
asked-
Cole.
Yeah, you don't
Oh,
need that.
sorry, we missed you at the beginning. Do you have anything to talk about at this? Cole is our, for those watching at home,
Got a
is our
cold or
student
something.
representative.
Sounds like.
He's lost his voice a little bit, but you're a senior this year? Okay, and he's gonna update us at all of our meetings on what's going on at the middle high school, and guide us along when we're struggling and spinning away.
All right. Excuse me, I do have a really bad cold. But basically, we're just gearing up for the new year right now. Today we just had freshman elections for officers and student council members, which is very important. It's good to get that in early so that, the students have a say and they're not waiting. Because I know when I was a freshman, I didn't get in until after pep rally, which is kind of stinks because as a student council member, that's like one of the biggest parts. Also, sports are going. I know the whole Triple E thing has really affected everyone. But the good thing is no one's really complaining.
Yeah.
And they're
That's
just...
what Mr. DeFranco was saying, so it's
Yeah.
nice to hear you say the same thing.
Well, it's true because, it's a very bad situation, but as long as we can practice, as we have a way of, getting around that, working around that, then I think everyone's happy. It's not the best situation, but, no one's, willing to quit because of it, which is good. And other than that, I think everyone's just, like I said, getting ready for the new year and things to come, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for
We're
being
looking
here.
forward
Well
to
done.
having
Yeah,
you.
and I'm sorry I was late.
Yeah,
I thought
no.
the meeting was at the high school. I was just misinformed about it. But
Not to worry. Okay. We're here.
Good thing you found us.
Yeah. And feel free to interject at any time during the meetings, or
Okay.
shoot us an email about the meeting or something you want to talk about.
And I just had a question. Is student council had any fundraisers they wanted to create? Did they have to run it by the school committee, or did they have to run it through the school and then the school committee?
You should run it through Mr. Lucia first, and then through the committee if you're soliciting students for funds on school grounds.
Okay.
So,
Well, thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any further discussion?
No.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
All right, everyone.
Motion carries.
All right.
You thought it was gonna be-